Hello, everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
Vic was used to his lectures being filled to capacity. His colleagues often joked that this part of the educational process could be monetized. Of course, professional recognition was somewhat flattering, but Professor Vic was not in the category of ambitious people. He was more interested in the process of transferring knowledge to the younger generation. At the end of every lecture, he would always say, "And if you remember at least a third of what I told you today, it's already a good result, and half of it is a great result." This last parting phrase became famous long ago and was repeated even in the student canteen or dormitory. Vic's lectures were very popular because the Doctor of Psychological Sciences explained everything clearly and understandably. He did not like to overload the listeners with a game of complex terms and spoke in simple and understandable language. After the professor's final word, a sigh of relief spread through the audience, but Vic was in no hurry to part with the students. "I want to add something from myself. The married life of my young friends is essentially a science. In this sphere, the language of ultimatums and threats is unacceptable. There are other rules." From the back row came a cheerful girl's voice. "Love." The professor smiled. Love. Much has been written about this feeling, and many wonderful movies have been made about it, but no one has yet been able to accurately describe it. If we look deeper, from the psychological point of view, mutual sympathy and affection between two individuals of the opposite sex cannot be eternal. The maximum duration does not exceed 7 years. A skinny guy in the front row shook his hand like a schoolboy to get the lecturer's attention. Vic nodded in agreement. "Was there something you wanted to clarify, young man?" "Yes. Does that mean, by your logic, that after 7 years of marriage, it's okay to get divorced?" Laughter rippled through the audience, but the professor was used to off-topic questions over the years. "It seems that you were not listening to me attentively. I said at the very beginning of the lecture that marriage is a form of partnership, and love is a pleasant addition to this partnership. And only the spouses themselves determine the duration of this wonderful feeling. And in general, family life is multifaceted. It is like a mosaic, consisting of different fragments, and each part of this panel is important. If one element disappears, the picture becomes incomplete." A girl sitting next to a boy who looked like a schoolboy asked defiantly, "Professor, then how should marital infidelity be interpreted? According to your version, does that mean there is nothing wrong with infidelity?" Vic looked at the girl intently, asking a provocative question in response. "You certainly remember the nursery rhyme about morality, about what is good and what is bad. I invite you to reread the works of the great poet once again, and you will surely find there the answer to your question. Do you have any other questions?" The girl who had failed flapped her doll-like eyelashes, while her neighbor openly gloated. "Our professor really put you in your place, Julia. Next time, think twice before asking uncomfortable questions." "But I asked him the right question. It's just that the professor is afraid to answer it honestly." Vic pretended not to hear the last remark and turned to face the door. He looked around again and met the girl's gaze with the girl who had failed. The pretty face was contorted with anger, and lightning flashed in the green eyes. The man endured that unpleasant look and thought, "Looks like I've made another enemy today. Now this pretty girl will take revenge on me." Over the years of his teaching career, Professor Vic had found himself in difficult life situations more than once. Being a charismatic man, he attracted women to him like a magnet. Not only young female students paid attention to him, which was forgivable given their age, but also mature ladies. The men of the faculty frankly envied him. "Vic, can you already organize auditions or form a harem? How many suitors do you have, and how do you manage them all?" The professor always tried to turn such conversations into a joke. "I have to use all my hidden resources. After all, every woman deserves attention. A real man has no right to deny her that." The professor's personal life was always on the agenda of the female members of the faculty. His love affairs were legendary. But Vic considered even gossip an important part of his image. He kept his distance from his colleagues, which only fueled new rumors. After the lecture, he walked into the rector's office and quickly dressed. "Goodbye, colleagues. Have a good weekend." The gray-haired lady sat down and curtsied, jokingly saying, "Vic, may all good things come to you as well." The others present nodded almost simultaneously, and when the door closed behind the professor, they began to discuss him heatedly. I wonder if his wife knows of his scheming, but I am not at all interested in that. I think it's unseemly to gnaw on other people's bones. Vic does the right thing. Women throw themselves at him, so why give up that pleasure? Clara, a lady who had impressed the faculty with her knowledge of palace etiquette, remarked with a sense of irony, "Am I not at a prestigious university, but at a flea market? Friends, this is indecent." The woman's dress fluttered with excitement, exposing her new curls. In response to her emotional statement, someone said softly, "Another victim of unrequited love, but there's no chance here. Vic prefers the young and slim." The evening city always evoked the most beautiful associations in the professor's soul. Sometimes he even composed rhymes in his head without writing them down. Cars whizzed by, but he did not hurry after them. He wondered why there were so few opportunities to enjoy these stunning views of the evening city. At times like this, his soul longed for a holiday. Vic occasionally allowed himself to ponder aloud, but it was rare. He didn't put his expensive SUV in the parking lot, but parked it in the yard. And on the way home he stopped at a flower store and was now rushing to the driveway with a bouquet of chrysanthemums. "Honey, I'm home," came his wife's voice from the bathroom. "You're home early today. I'll be there in a couple minutes." Kathy, with a lush wooden hat on her head, came out into Vic's living room, blushing, with his wife's face and a lovely mole on her dainty neck. "You are simply charming." He handed the woman a bouquet, and she closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of autumn flowers. "What a delight. Vic, tell me, what's the occasion for giving flowers today? Do you need a special occasion to do a nice thing to a loved one?" Tonight was an unusual evening. I was driving and enjoying the views of the city, and I really wanted to share my joy with you. And here's why. And that, my dear Kathy, is why I'm inviting you to the restaurant. "Vic, but you should have warned me in my condition." "I could have, but I didn't. You said yourself that unexpected surprises are more pleasant." Kathy threw a towel at her husband with feigned disapproval. "Vic, sometimes I think you see through me like an X-ray, and frankly, it scares me. Why did I marry a psychology professor? You had no other choice. Besides, when you agreed to be my wife, I was just a grad student. Vic, don't distract me with idle chatter, or I'll need until midnight to pack." The woman disappeared into the bedroom, and from the quiet noise coming from there, it was easy to guess that she was choosing an outfit. The professor waited patiently, sitting on the couch and replaying the recent events in his head. "Kathy, imagine this. Today a student decided to embarrass me. Did she or did she not succeed? I don't know. I was giving a lecture on the psychology of family relationships, which of course excited my restless listeners. Kathy, strutting around in front of her husband in a tight black dress. How do I look? You look great in any outfit. Thank you. 5 more minutes and I'll be ready. So what was your student's question? Nothing much, actually. She asked about infidelity. Of course, she was not only interested in the domestic aspect, but also the scientific explanation or my personal opinion." Katie looked at her husband with a questioning look, concern reflected on her face. "And what was my professor's answer?" "There is hardly a one-syllable answer to that question. How many people, so many opinions?" And the woman, embracing her husband, whispered, "I don't want to know anything about your infidelity. And whoever tells me that you are cheating on me will be my greatest enemy." The man gently pushed his wife away. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely." She stood up abruptly with feigned cheerfulness and declared, "Are we going to the restaurant, or are we going to get into other people's problems? You're not cheating on me, are you? And I didn't get into that kind of stuff either. By the way, I got my share today. I've already regretted 100 times that I quit practicing at the clinic and became a civil servant." Vic realized that his wife wanted to change the subject. They spent a wonderful evening in the best restaurant in town, and Kathy willingly shared her work problems with her husband. "You know, I often catch myself thinking I've turned into something like that." "Well, that's an exaggeration. Where does that come from?" "Just think about it. I'm well aware of the challenges that medical professionals face on a daily basis. People often work at the limit of their abilities, trying, pardon the expression, to create something useful out of waste. It can be called a feat. But our commission shows up and turns the heroes almost into criminals. But this situation is not only in medicine. I agree, but we must fight it. Don't be afraid to get involved. Katie, tell me honestly, what are you up to? I want to go back to the clinic. In fact, I've been invited there. Are you sure that's what you want? Do you really want to plunge back into the nightmare of round-the-clock duty, betrayals, co-workers, and other side effects of the profession? Katie pushed her empty plate away. The cooking here is great too. The woman was silent for a while. She nervously twirled a strand of hair on her finger, as if it would help her find the right words. Understand, dear, I need something to fill the void. We try to avoid the subject, but everyone thinks you're thinking about it too, and I know you are. Katie, please don't start. We agreed on everything with you a long time ago. No, Vic, you've made up your mind for both of us. You give a lecture today. I'm not arguing that psychology is a useful science, and you're right that a family is built on trust. But it's not about trust and respect and all those other hackneyed terms. Without children, a family is like an amorphous entity. Vic saw that his wife was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He took her trembling hands and kissed them. Kathy, you're a doctor yourself, and you realize you can't constantly berate yourself. You have to accept it. Many couples live happily without children. Others adopt. I'm willing to accept whatever you decide, but please don't torture yourself. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. Of course, adopting a child from an orphanage is a noble cause, but I've always dreamed of having a child of my own. And every day that dream gets farther and farther away. Soon there won't be any chance of it coming true. Have you forgotten that in a few months I will be 35 years old? The man made a funny face. Madam, you're lying. You are fresh and young. The woman smiled against her will. Thank you. You always support me. How could it be otherwise? You're the only woman I truly love. Katie had heard her husband say this solemn assurance many times, but the more he repeated these words, the more doubts about their sincerity crept into her soul. Katie was the only child in the family, but she was brought up mainly by her grandmother, as her parents had other concerns. The girl's mother could not live a day without social work, and her father began as a simple worker, but over the years of hard work rose to a director's position. The peak of the career of the head of the family coincided with global transformations in the country, and Joe was able to correctly orient it, buying shares in his company. This was only the beginning of the movement to a prosperous life. The wave of perestroika threw the enterprising worker to the surface, where the cream of society gathered. Soon he was elected to the board of directors. The high position of her father opened almost any door in front of Katie, but thanks to the upbringing of her grandmother, the girl grew up an obedient child and never made exaggerated demands. The girl's upbringing was admired by teachers. Wow, such modesty in such parents. Some of them, like spoiled brats, whiting their fingers at teachers, rude, and Katie compared to them, an angel in the flesh. But excessive modesty was despised by those who quickly rose from dirt to princes. Katie was threatened on more than one occasion, and once her peers decided to stage a public punishment to intimidate others. But it was only by chance that the humiliating punishment was avoided. The old man sensed something wrong when a crowd of teenagers broke into the territory of a dilapidated factory. For a small fee, he guarded the abandoned plant from intruders. In doing so, he used a police whistle. The criminals were not expecting an unauthorized intervention, and at the first sound of the whistle scattered. At the sight of the failed punishment, the villains left the camera and Katie. The old man carefully turned the device in his hands, trying to understand how this device works. After all, at that time, Japanese technology was a great rarity. Kathy was familiar with such a device and told the old man that everything was simple. All you have to do is press this red button. That's it? Why are you so smart? Did they want to beat you up? They think I'm proud and conceited. You're not. The girl shook her head. But even if you hadn't helped me, I wouldn't have asked those bastards for help. Oh, you're a brave girl. And where do you live? Can you accompany me? Where else would I go? And suddenly these, what did you call them? Bastards? Ambush around the corner. The kind old man was walking the girl almost all the way home when he was called from behind. Grandpa, what are you doing here? Who authorized you to leave your post? The old man shuddered and froze in place, but then turned around and scolded the approaching guy. The guy burst into laughter. Vic, can you scare your own grandfather like that? I almost died and fell over. Katie laughed too, because the old man clumsily swung his cane, trying to hit his grandson with it, but the boy kept dodging the blows. Finally, he caught up with us, but the girl felt that Vic had deliberately given up. For a 14-year-old girl, a second-year student of the capital's university seemed an unattainable adult. The boy asked her a few questions more out of politeness than out of interest. When he learned that the grandfather had saved the girl from her peers, he was not even surprised. My old man was used to being on guard. In his day, he wielded not only a cane, but also a Makarov pistol. He saved many lives and caught dozens, if not hundreds, of criminals. The girl looked at the old man with admiration, and he even blushed with embarrassment. Vic, don't embarrass me in front of the lady. A man should not brag about his achievements. Why waste words? It's better to invite a girl for tea, exclaimed the young man smoothly. Come to our house today. If I'm not mistaken, we are neighbors. Grandfather lives in the second entrance, apartment 45, and I visit him sometimes when I'm bored. Katie nodded in agreement, but she wasn't going to visit. She didn't tell her parents anything about what had happened. They would have stayed in the dark if it hadn't been for her grandmother. At dinner, she told a terrible story, which was told to her by a good acquaintance in the store. That grandfather worked as an operative for about 30 years, and now works as a security guard on a well-deserved vacation, looking after the territory of the plant, and the other day there was almost an accident there. Teenagers beat up a schoolgirl, and the grandfather saved the girl. There's no telling what could have happened. Katie decided to make a correction. Grandma, they wanted to start a fight, but it didn't come to that. How do you know the details? The girl blushed, caught off guard, and Grandma triumphantly declared that there was no point in hiding it from me, and you know it very well. You were almost targeted. My parents were shocked by what they heard. Joe even lost his appetite from the confusion. The times we live in, it's not even safe to go to regular school anymore. Grandma continued with the same incomprehensible joy. That's right, Joe. Regular school. But you've got connections. You can get the kid into a grammar school, where the children of these, new rich people go. Are we any worse than them? You're always right, Mom. I'll take care of it tomorrow. The father turned out to be a man of his word, and the next day transferred his daughter to a prestigious school. Although Katie didn't like this sudden change, she was used to obeying her father. On the first day of school, she met Vic, the grandson of the old watchman. He recognized her immediately. It's not good to lie. We waited for you and your grandfather all evening, and you didn't show up. You didn't even tell us your name, which is even sadder. Katie didn't know where to hide from the prying eyes that shot arrows from every direction. As she was talking to the cute intern, she started mumbling something. Vic was clearly enjoying her confusion. So you don't run off again, Katie. I'll walk you home after class, okay? By the way, I didn't even know you were in this gymnasium. Today is my first day, and I've been practicing here for a week already, so to speak, studying the psychology of modern school children. After class, Vic was really waiting for Katie at the entrance, high school girl, and immediately began to discuss this burning topic. Young ladies could not understand how the new girl managed to captivate such a cool guy from the first day. They looked at Katie with envy. And when Vic's practice was over, the first beauty of the class asked, "Where's your boyfriend?" This question embarrassed the girl, and she began to justify herself. "Vic is not my boyfriend. We just met by chance and are just chatting." The girls nodded understandingly, but there was doubt in their eyes. "Yeah, well, you were just hanging out. We believed you, telling tales to others. Well, that's your own business." Vic hadn't been in town for over 2 years. Katie saw him again when she was in her senior year of high school. The young man was finishing his university studies at the time. Here he is again, to do an internship, then get a diploma, and then theoretically, a job. But this is not part of my plans. I only go to graduate school. For the young girl, everything Vic said seemed an unattainable height. She listened to him, afraid to ask too many questions, realizing that his plans made a strong impression on the graduate. The young man asked, "Where are you going, Katie?" "To medical school." "Oh, that's a bold statement. By the way, I can help with connections." "No, that won't be necessary. I'll be fine on my own." "Are you that confident in your abilities?" "No, I'm not. But my father is against using connections and other ways of easy entry." Vic looked at the girl carefully. "Your father is right. You can tell he's old school." "Mine too." He told me not to count on his help, but I was incredibly lucky to get in. I got in on the first try. Katie remembered that spring for the rest of her life. She and Vic met almost every day and just chatted about life. Several times the young man invited her to a cafe where they ate the most delicious ice cream. There were no hints of something more from the guys, but in the heart of the girl already sprouted the first sprouts of a strong feeling. This budding love gave her confidence. Perhaps it was this optimistic attitude that helped the girl to withstand all the exams. When Katie saw her name on the list of those admitted to the institute, her heart sang with joy. Vic was sincerely worried for her friend and also rejoiced at her success. "Well done, Kathy. Now all I have to do is take care of you. After all, you don't mind." "What do you mean?" "I'm all for it. If you are, be prepared for the worst." Kathy was used to his jokes and played along. "Look at that. I haven't even said yes yet, and you're already threatening me. I'll tell you a secret. You'll be punished for every failure. If you fail a section, you're stuck in the dorm for a month. I'll think about other punishments later." The first 2 years of school were difficult. Katie spent half the night studying. In the morning, she was desperate for sleep. After lectures, she had to go to the hospital several times a week to complete the mandatory practical hours. So meetings with Vic became rare, but he called often. In the third year, student life gradually fell into place. Relations with Vic imperceptibly moved to a new level. The young man moved step by step towards his goal and was already planning the defense of his dissertation. His status imposed certain obligations on him, so it was necessary to change the room in the dormitory to a rented apartment. Kathy took this news with joy and offered the guy her help. "Vic, if you don't mind, I'll help you organize your bachelor apartment. I'll be more than happy." "I wanted to ask you myself, but I didn't dare." He looked at the girl for a long time, but it was a different look. "Katie, the truth is, I wanted to have you by my side all the time. You're an extraordinary girl, and you make me feel good." That night she stayed at Vic's place and soon moved into his rented apartment. Classmates frankly envied and reviled them. A provincial girl. And one particularly zealous gossip girl decided to add another insult to Katie's happy life. Finding a convenient moment after a lecture, she told her in detail about the alleged affairs of a young graduate student. "Look, I had no idea you and Vic were so serious. I don't deny he's handsome, and there's no denying his success. But he's jumping from bed to bed. The girls told me that the grad student even had an affair with the head of the department. They said she helped him get ahead, and someone in our group told me that." Katie interrupted the flow of gossip. "Don't bother. I don't believe a word you say anyway, and gossip isn't really my thing. And you better stay out of my sight." Offended well-wishers shouted loudly after her. "She's a collective farm idiot. They wish her the best and she snorts. Well, soon we'll see the end of this happy story. Your grad student will ask you for help and dump you. It's a classic, and you're no exception." Katie was used to trusting people, and Vic had long been the standard of decency. Though she didn't believe the rumors much, a grain of distrust settled in her heart. She cried all evening, and at night she felt sick. She had severe stomach pains and had to call an ambulance. She was immediately taken to the hospital to the operating room. Soon the doctor came out and said to Vic, "What you did not say to your spouse. It is sad that the first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage." Vic couldn't recover for a long time. He sat next to Katie all night. "Why didn't you tell me anything?" "Vic, I didn't know. I didn't suspect. But something must have caused it. You're right. Some ill-wisher told me about your adventures, and you believed it?" "No, but it was very unpleasant to hear." "Katie, you realize you can't believe everything. You could have asked me, and I would have given you an honest answer." "Would you?" I was embarrassed to ask. "Of course, you know how much I love you." Kathy cried, and there was bitterness of loss in those tears, but there was happiness in them too. After being discharged from the hospital, they immediately applied for marriage. In her heart, the young woman believed that the first failed pregnancy was just a coincidence, an unpleasant episode. But as the years went by, she couldn't bear a child. Katie traveled to all the best resorts. She was treated in expensive clinics, but each new pregnancy ended in the death of the child. Vic couldn't bear to see his wife suffer from infertility. "Katie, please stop torturing yourself. I'm begging you. I don't like that your desire to get pregnant has become an obsession. It's not normal. and I can see that your obsession is taking a toll on your mental state." The woman looked at her husband strangely. "Vic, if I'm abnormal, if it's determined in a special institution, then I can't change everything that's in my head. I can't do anything about it. Do you understand? I dream about kids every night, babies that I couldn't bear, and it's horrible." The man tried his best to comfort his wife, but her confession only further confirmed his suspicions. It was at his insistence that Katie was transferred from the children's hospital, where she disappeared for days at a time, to the regional health department. He thought that the new position would at least lighten things up a bit. And indeed, positive changes took place immediately. Katie regained her interest in life. Laura appeared in his life by chance. For Vic, his wife has always been the embodiment of female attractiveness. He intuitively looked for familiar features in any woman who caught his eye. But when he first saw Laura in the classroom, he immediately felt a long-forgotten excitement. The second-year student was an exact replica of the young Katie who had captivated his heart. Lectures on psychology were not compulsory for students of the philological faculty, where the girl studied, but she diligently attended them. The most surprising thing is that the girl listened to the lecturer, holding her breath. Vic for many years got used to feeling the gazes of others, but in their eyes it was not just interest in the subject, but something more. It went on like this for over 2 months. And one day Vic couldn't stand it and asked the girl to stay after the lecture. She just nodded her head in agreement and waited for the audience to be free. He tried to be friendly. He asked, "Tell me please, what is the reason for your interest in my lectures? If I am not mistaken, you are studying philology." The girl, hesitating, replied, "Yes, but I have always been interested in psychology. My friends told me a lot about your lectures, so I decided to broaden my horizons." Is that a bad thing? On the contrary, such a desire for knowledge should be welcomed. But if you are interested in this discipline, maybe you should think about changing your faculty. No, I really need to finish philological." The girl was afraid to look him in the eye and blushed constantly, growing paler and paler. In moments of excitement, she looked remarkably like Kathy. Vic asked the student a few more meaningless questions and let her go to the next lecture. The girl didn't show up. She was absent the following days as well. And Vic became worried. Suddenly he realized that he missed those eyes, in which a whole range of feelings wanted to come out. He asked the guy who always sat next to her, "Strange girl, do you happen to know where your neighbor has disappeared to?" "Laura. Oh, she twisted her leg in an athletics competition. She's resting in her dorm now. Some people are lucky. We're working like slaves on a plantation." "Your look, young man, doesn't look like a man burdened with hard labor." The boy turned out to be a clever boy, and he got into an argument with the teacher. "Didn't you yourself say not so long ago that appearances can be deceiving?" "Well, based on appearances, I'm going to be a healthy guy. It's very tiring." After the lecture, I can't even find the right words to compare it to. By the way, the girl Laura you're interested in is a real tin soldier. I just love girls like that. You see, there are role models. Well, no. Sorry, but Zavialova can't serve as an example in the realities of modern life. I wonder why. Because, how shall I put it, she's not exactly well off. She's been going around in the same skirt and blouse for 2 years now, so our girls shun her. But I talk to her sometimes. You know, general stuff. Why are you interested, Laura? Just curious. She used to attend my lectures, and then she disappeared. Perhaps you'd like me to give her a message? If you'd like, I could accompany you. We live on the same floor in the dormitory. Vic himself, without knowing why, agreed to go to the dormitory with a student in the dormitory. He had never allowed himself to do such a thing before. But Laura had touched some thin strings in his soul. On the way, Joe, that was the name of the fighting guy, spilled everything he knew about Laura. I didn't pay much attention to it, but our classmates said Laura had been sent away to school. Either she came from a dysfunctional family or her father had died in the line of duty. I won't lie, but I know for a fact that it's always hard for her financially. But she never asks for help. She's too proud, and she doesn't even accept help. Thank you for the information. Do you think she would accept a small gift from us? Today I plan to fry potatoes. The guy scratched his head. I can't promise, but we can try to convince our hostile mom to look on the bright side. The girl didn't expect to see Vic and was at a loss for words at his appearance. She was giving Joe strange signals. He only shrugged his shoulders. Laura, I'm not involved in this. I just helped when I was asked. You haven't seen the light of day for almost 2 weeks. So to accommodate the guest, Joe handed out bags of groceries like a host. Okay, I'm gonna go to my room. Do you want me to bring you something to eat? I'm planning on frying potatoes tonight. Laura looked at Vic and blushed again. No, Joe, I'm not hungry. Accompanied by Vic, the student left, and he was left alone with the girl, who could not recover from the embarrassment. The situation was awkward for both of them, and the teacher hurried to say goodbye. In the name of justice, I will wait for you in my lectures. He walked down the long corridor under curious stares and scolded himself for rash behavior. Why did I go to this dormitory? Giving them extra material for gossip, Vic was not indifferent to all things human. In his life there were short but pleasant romances, but family always remained his top priority, and he wasn't about to change his priorities in life. On the way home, he tried to figure out what had touched his heart so much. A week later, he saw Laura again, and he felt at peace. After the lecture, the girl stayed to thank him for his concern. There was no longer fear in her eyes, and she was smiling. Thank you, Vic. It was so unexpected that I was confused and did not even offer you tea. That's all right. I think we'll have a chance to talk again. And such an opportunity did present itself. At the end of February, the news spread around the university that there was an opportunity to rest at the recreation center. Excited Kira went around with a notebook and wrote down all the students who wanted to go. The public was not left out, including Vic, who at this time was busy preparing for his defense. Tapping her pencil on the list, she explained to her colleagues. Most of them are the students who have shown the best results in their studies. But to control this restless crowd, we need a few teachers, preferably men. Comrades, who agrees? No one expressed a desire to spend the weekend away from the city. Then Kira decided to employ the reliable voluntary coercive method. If there are no volunteers, I as the senior have the authority. I'm asking you, Vic, to go to this recreation center. The man was taken aback. But I have other plans. Soon defense. It's so unexpected. Kira confidently shook her curls, putting on her glasses. Well, everything in life is unexpected. We can't draw lots here. You're the youngest on our team. It's your honor. Don't feel bad. There will be a great program with disco and games. The sponsors have decided to give our students a party. The woman winked coquettishly and replied, If I were younger, I wouldn't miss a single party. After such a convincing argument, Vic was embarrassed to refuse when he told his wife about the trip. She was happy for him and said, Vic, that's great. You work so hard. You need to relax and have fun. I wouldn't mind having some fun with the college crowd myself. Kathy was genuinely happy for her husband, but even in her worst nightmare, she couldn't imagine how the trip would end. And indeed, the recreation program was rich, from skiing and sledding to delicious fish for lovers of winter fishing. Then the youth organized the competition of snow sculptures, and the highlight of the program was the evening disco. The holiday was in full swing. Having gone down to the hall of the first floor to make sure that the young people behaved decently, Vic had to make sure that the administration of the campground took care of everything, and there would be no alcohol. A tight work schedule did not allow Vic to attend such entertainment events even in his younger years. Therefore, finding himself among the changing lights and unnatural distortions, he not only felt lost, but also lost himself in space. Suddenly, he heard cheerful laughter and someone gently touched his arm. Vic, join us. He looked around, trying to identify his interlocutor. Don't you recognize me? It's me, Laura. He scrutinized the face of the girl with the bold makeup and could hardly recognize the demure Laura in her. The student was pleased with the impression she had made and laughed merrily. I can't always be a fool. I try to follow your advice. At one of your lectures, you said that sometimes you need to change everything 180 degrees. So I decided to test it out on myself. This is the rule. Energetic music started playing, and Laura began to dance to the beat. Vic caught himself thinking that he wanted something more than just watching the dance. Vic, why are you dancing? I can't dance like that. And when I was young, other dances were in vogue. The fast composition changed to a slow one and the girl leaned towards Vic. He felt an electric shock run through his body, but it was another Laura who attracted him like a magnet. The disco ended far past midnight, and the vacationers lazily scattered to their rooms. Vic escorted the girl to room number 11, but no sooner had she entered than Laura immediately jumped outside. What's wrong? Nothing much. It's just that my roommate is in there, but she's not alone. The man shrugged. It happens, but you can't go against nature. The girl looked at him expectantly, and in her gaze he could read something that was not to be spoken aloud. The man interpreted this silent appeal correctly, and in a voice trembling with excitement he offered, "I have a single room, but there's a cozy couch where I can settle down. What do you say?" "No, I don't want to inconvenience you. I'd rather wait here in the hallway. It seems to me that your willingness to sacrifice yourself in this situation is not justified. You're not inconveniencing me at all." Vic playfully opened the door to the room. "Come in." Everything that followed seemed like a dream. The mind receded. It wasn't until morning that the man realized what had happened. He was tormented by guilt. He tried to intensify this feeling. He began to think about his wife, who was far away and did not know about his cheating. He sighed heavily. It must have been too loud because Laura stirred next to him. "Can I sleep some more? I feel so good. I had such sweet dreams tonight." He glanced at Laura's watch. It was already 8:30. It would be breakfast soon. It wasn't hunger that worried him at the moment, but something else. He realized that the hallways would soon be bustling with activity, and he didn't want to be seen with Laura. The girl reached under the blanket. "I'll just stand here for a minute." Vic was the first to get out of bed and headed for the shower. When he returned to the room, she was no longer there. Only the smell of her perfume reminded him of the madness of that night. For the rest of the day, Vic tried not to think about his careless act. At first, he berated himself for his momentary weakness, because he had never had an affair with a female student before. He decided that he should immediately break off all ties, so that this casual crush would not develop into something more serious. But Laura had other plans. She continued to attend his lectures and always waited for him in the hallway afterward. This constant presence soon began to annoy him. "Laura, stop following me around. It would be better if we both forgot what happened between us." "Vic, better for whom?" "For you, first and foremost. This stupidity doesn't have to ruin your life or mine. You need to focus on your studies." The girl repeated his last sentence helplessly. "Yes, I need to focus on my studies. Forgive me, I won't bother you anymore." After this conversation, the girl stopped attending his lectures. The unpleasant burden of responsibility for the fate of this lovely creature was lifted from his soul. Life returned to its usual course, and Vic decided not to allow himself such carelessness from now on. The vacation season was approaching, and Laura decided to remind him of her existence. She was waiting for him in the park near the university. Vic saw her from afar and waved to her. He decided to limit himself to that greeting, but the girl got up from the bench and headed towards him. She was wearing a light dress that fluttered in the wind, and as the colors of the fabric tightly encased the girl's figure, he noticed her bulging belly. The shock was so intense that Vic couldn't move. An inner voice reassured him. This simply couldn't be happening. "No, it's not possible." Laura was silent and looked at him with desperation in her eyes. "Vic, help me please. What am I supposed to do? Why are you asking me this question? I'm sorry, but I don't believe this is my child. Or did you have some kind of plan? It's your baby, and I'm supposed to take your word for it." She nodded and burst into tears, trying not to attract the attention of those around her. Vic pushed the girl into the car. He spoke to Laura harshly, even harshly. "Look, honey, if you thought you could buy me with your tears, you were wrong. I don't respond to such tricks anymore. Now, about your desperate situation. You're the one who made the decision to do this, and like a normal man, I accepted the challenge. No, I'm not abdicating my responsibility. I will not be manipulated. And one more thing. Don't think I'd leave my wife for you." The sobs intensified. "Vic, what am I supposed to do then? Why are you asking me this question? I'm sorry, but I don't believe it's my child. But even if it is, that doesn't give you the right to make any demands on me. You're a grown woman and you made this decision on your own. I didn't promise you anything. Nothing." Vic turned down the first alley he came across and stopped the car. "Let's make a deal. I'll help you, but you won't make any demands on me." "Agreed." Through her tears, Vic heard the answer he'd been waiting for. "You realize you'll have to leave school for a while and get a job. I'll give you some money and you can come home. You have parents or relatives, don't you?" "No, no one. My mom was, but she died." Something prickled in the man's heart. "But you must have a place to live, right?" I don't have anything. When my father was gone, my mom went into debt. She took out loans and couldn't pay them off. So they took away our apartment. We lived with my mom's friend for a long time, and then a lump of nausea rose in my throat. But housing gotta go somewhere. Vic struggled to squeeze out that mom couldn't cope and decided to leave this world on her own. The girl cried, burying her face in the back of the seat. And after all, it was her friend Aunt Zoya who had chosen a target direction for me to study. He consoled her as one consoles small children. Don't cry like that. There's nothing you can do now. In your condition, tears are contraindicated. I won't leave you alone with your misfortune. Anyone can be in this situation, and so can I. What happened to your father? Your friend Joe said he was dead. The girl smiled through her tears. You, Vic, are a lot like my father. I don't remember him very well because I was very little. Yes, he died. My mom didn't like to talk about it, so I don't know much about the incident. We only have his medal. It was given to him posthumously. That meaning turned everything upside down in the mind of a psychology teacher. He was trying to understand why some people are lucky and others are plagued by adversity. What had this unfortunate little girl done from birth that she deserved such hardships? What did she do wrong? This is a question that Laura herself has tried to answer many times. All the days blended into one continuous gray blur, and only her little son Jack made her want to live. And sometimes at night she had vivid dreams about the past, when she was foolish and naive, and believed in love from happy thoughts. Her reflections were interrupted by her son's voice. Mom, am I not going to school again today? Yes, my dear, you will have to miss a few days. Mom, why am I always sick? Where did you learn to say that? Our teacher said I'm weak, that's why I'm sick. I was sick a lot when I was a kid too, and my mom was always on sick leave. She was scolded for it at work. Does your boss scold you for being sick too? Son, let's not think about it, eat porridge. To be strong, you have to eat well. You always have a full plate. Laura put the plate of steaming porridge on the table next to the bed. I'll bring tea and honey later. We don't have any honey right now. But I'll buy some when your daddy sends us some money. Maybe I'll get a paycheck soon and I'll buy you honey and vitamins. Jack didn't want porridge. Laura watched him. Conflicting feelings were struggling in her soul. She regarded motherhood as the ultimate gift and her son as her greatest miracle. But the unsettled life, due to lack of money, had become an insoluble problem. But the worst thing was that lately she was thinking more and more often about her mother's untimely death, and that frightened her the most. At first, Vic had actually helped her. Through his connections, he provided the future mother and child with a place to live. And although a room in the dormitory cannot be considered the pinnacle of desires, it is still some corner. Thanks to her patron, Laura got a job and even received maternity leave. Vic sent her regular remittances and visited her once a month. Oddly enough, Jack was a miniature copy of his father. He had the same smile and even gestures. That's why Vic never brought up the subject of paternity. During their short meetings, he always gave time to his little son, as if trying to stock up on positive emotions. But the most touching was the moment when the baby stretched out his hand to him and clearly said, "Daddy." Vic picked up his son, and they spun around the room together. "Yes, I am your daddy, son, and I want you to grow up healthy and happy." The baby laughed happily, and Laura enjoyed this happy scene. When Jack grew older, Vic brought him a tricycle as a present. The boy's delight was boundless, but even the father with childish enthusiasm tried to teach the child to ride a bicycle. And then, saying goodbye, he hugged Laura for the first time in many years and quietly said, "Thank you for our son, and forgive me if you can. You don't need to apologize to me because I'm happy." She looked into his eyes for a long time, and he did not look away. It was the look of a woman who had learned the true taste of life, not a naive girl, and he felt uncomfortable. He caught himself again in the thought that he was always trying to make amends, but he was afraid to admit it to himself. "Laura, you say there's no need to be shy. I might inadvertently miss something important. You've been a great help to us. The only thing I want to ask is that you come here more often. Jack misses you so much. You know, he tells stories about you in kindergarten." "That's interesting. If you could tell us more about Jack's fantasies." The teacher told us that she wanted to punish him for bad behavior, but he proudly told her that he would complain to his daddy, who is a professor. And how did the poor teacher react to this threat? She thought Jack was joking, and then she asked me about your profession. You know, lately my son has been asking why you don't live with us. Vic was silent. All the way back, he thought about doing something. It seemed that living with two families wasn't going to work. Something had to be done, but there was no way out of the impasse. But the number of visits suddenly decreased. Perhaps the man decided that his rare visits would help Laura and her son get used to the idea that they could never become a full-fledged family. Mama don't get that disgusting much in me no more. Jack pushed the plate away. Okay, I won't force you, son. I've got to go to work and you get some rest. I won't be long. The doctor should be here soon. Laura worked on the assembly line at the dairy, and her frequent sick leaves were affecting the production process. That's what the department head said. Taking 3 deep breaths, the woman knocked on the door. Oh, Laura, what brings you here? I was told this morning that you were on sick leave again? Anna, my son is sick again. I don't know what to do. I'll tell you what, quit your job and stay home. Why don't I just grab the first guy I see on the street? You're always trying to stump me, aren't you? Well, Anna, I'm 42 years old. We'd all understood your situation and even sympathized. When the child was little, we thought he'd get over it, stop getting sick. Maybe you're not taking good care of the boy, and it's time for us to involve the appropriate authorities. Anna, how can you say such things? I was just reminding you as a preventative measure. But think for yourself why you're so suspicious. Go and take care of your child. Is there anything else? Yes, if it's all right, I'd like a small advance. The primary care physician referred me to the diagnostic center because Jack's test results were bad. No problem. But when will you get your paycheck? The doctor listened to Jack's lungs and heart for a long time. Then he laid the boy on the couch and tapped his bulging ribs with his fingers. Mommy, why is your boy so thin? You must be keeping him on a diet? Jack decided to stick up for his mom. Mommy feeds me and nurses me when I'm sick. I just don't feel like eating. The doctor smirked. Good for you. If you're protecting your mom, then get dressed. I won't be needing your fingers anymore. He rolled his eyes. The boy explained. So they're going to take blood from my vein. You'll have to be patient. Mommy, I've written to you urgently. Be sure to come see me later. There may be some additional tests that need to be done. Laura and her son spent the whole day at the diagnostic center. They went from office to office having him examined and scanned and ended up with piles of papers. They knocked on the office of the doctor who had seen them that morning. And I thought you had already gone home. Good thing you caught me. It's a long walk. Tired of walking, Laura sat down on the couch. Almost 100 kilometers. We're afraid we'll miss the last bus. That's fine. I'll try not to hold you up. But as the doctor looked through the papers, his face grew more and more tense. My young friend, can you wait for your mom in the hallway? Jack didn't need to be told twice, and he slipped out the door. There was something in the doctor's demeanor that Laura immediately sensed something wrong. Tell me, what's wrong with my son? The doctor was silently fiddling with a ballpoint pen. We don't know for sure yet, but the boy's tests are not very good. Actually, they're very bad. I don't want to scare you, but these results indicate a malignant disease. Laura felt her heart racing and found it hard to breathe. The doctor noticed that her condition had changed. You're not feeling well? It's nothing, I can manage. I just didn't expect it to be this serious. We can take the boy to the hospital for further examination. No, doctor, we better come again if we have to. It's just vital right now. I'll expect you in exactly 10 days. Laura spent the whole night without sleep. Her imagination painted the most terrible pictures, which she tried with all her might to drive away from her. She stroked her sleeping son's hand. She consoled herself. Nothing. I'll definitely think of something. Where can I get the money? I could ask for help from an unemployment fund, or I could get a loan from the bank. No one will give me an advance, and taking a loan is very dangerous. She remembered her mother's tragic fate and immediately dismissed the idea. And among us, Jack will confirm it. The treatment is very expensive. We'll have to ask Vic for help. He can't say no when it comes to saving his son. Just before dawn, exhausted from her worries, Laura fell into a troubled sleep, and outside the window the sun was already beginning to rise. She dialed the number Vic had left her, but the automated voice answered that such a number did not exist. Then she decided on a desperate measure. One day during her visit, Vic went for a walk with his son, leaving his cell phone on the table. During his absence, the phone rang. and a number consisting of the word wife popped up on the screen. The woman wrote down the number, not knowing that she would soon have to call Vic's wife. There was an elevated mood in the lecture hall, and this youthful enthusiasm was transferred to the professor, who excitedly revealed the secrets of personal success in business. After Vika's lecture, the very blonde who had tried to put him in a difficult position more than once stopped him with her question. "Professor, I have a question. I can already guess what it is. It's nice to know that I finally have your attention. I try to give equal attention to all my listeners, so what's bothering you this time?" "Well, I'll tell you. From what you've told us today, it seems that almost anyone can succeed. Then why do most entrepreneurs fail?" Again, you aren't listening to me very well. Motivation alone is not enough. Persistence and desire alone will not get you far. Talent is necessary even in business, as well as in any other business. But I always thought that talent is art, literature, movies. Yes, that's all right. It's a separate topic altogether. But I can say that talent is the highest level of skill, and mastery must be honed over the years. Is that clear now? I think so. Then it turns out that all the stories about miraculous success and million-dollar incomes are a myth. Why, there are lucky people who immediately achieve success, but their success is due to rationality and a competent approach to solving important problems. But for most businessmen, at least for those with whom I am closely acquainted, the road to success was long and thorny. Julia snorted skeptically. "Well, just like the famous saying, it's a long road to stardom." "Julia, it's not a saying. It's a famous quote from Seneca, the ancient Roman philosopher. You know so much that it's enough to drive you crazy. On the contrary, Julia, knowledge is power. And I even like the fact that you keep asking me off-topic questions, even though many of them are clearly provocative." Kathy met her husband in the hallway. From the expression on her face, he realized that something unpleasant had happened in his absence. "Kathy, you're as gloomy as a storm cloud. What's the matter?" The woman never took her eyes off her husband. "Laura called me today." Vic froze, but tried not to show his confusion. "The thing is that your son..." The man lost his temper. "What's wrong with him?" "He's sick. He's been given a terrible diagnosis, and now he needs immediate help. Katie, I'll explain everything to you. Later, it turned out like this. I didn't see it coming. I don't need you to explain anything to me. I don't want to listen to you. If you destroyed all faith in me, at least give hope to those who still believe in you." Vic started pacing around the apartment. "I don't know why she called. I asked her not to call." Kathy walked over to him and took hold of the lapel of his jacket. "Can you hear me? Your son is in trouble. Stop your hysterics." He carefully released himself from his wife's grip. "And you calmly tell me this without reproach, without asking anything. Would it make a difference? You're right. And that's why I feel so bad, like I've committed a felony. Vic, you can look into your vulnerable soul later. Now go find out what's wrong with the boy. A child is not to blame for the mistakes of adults." When Vic was already at the door, his wife called out to him, "I'll go with you. It will be easier for me to sort things out. After all, you have not forgotten that I am a pediatrician by training." The man was surprised by his wife's reaction, but he was even more surprised by his own fear. He was afraid not for his son, but for himself. More precisely, at that moment, he was worried about the effect the discovery might have on his reputation. He was sure that Kathy would forgive him for his infidelity. By evening, Jack's condition had deteriorated. He refused to eat, complaining of nausea and dizziness. Laura called an ambulance. The doctor examined the child for a long time, then looked at the conclusion from the diagnostic center and returned the documents to the mother. He indifferently said, "Unfortunately, we can't help you now. This is not our competence. Now we will give him an injection to make him sleep. I advise you to see the doctor who examined you tomorrow. But how can I take a sick child with me? Mom, this is your problem, and you have to solve it." After the injection, Jack fell asleep, but slept restlessly. Around midnight, hurried footsteps were heard in the hallway, followed by a knock on the door. Laura, without turning around, whispered, "Come in. Only please be quiet." The woman thought it was the dormitory superintendent, but a familiar voice made her turn around. "Laura, it's me." In the semi-darkness of the room, the woman could not make out that Vic came accompanied by a well-dressed companion. "Meet Kathy, my wife. You were talking to her." Laura did not know how to behave in such a situation. She shifted her gaze from Vic to his wife, but said nothing. Kathy took off his coat. "Where can I wash my hands around here?" Laura gasped. "I'll show you. Come here." She was completely confused. Her mother watched Katie's every move. She looked at the awake child. "He must be taken to the hospital immediately. It's not safe to stay at home. I can't say anything about an examination right now, but the boy's lungs are wheezing." "Did the ER doctor tell you that?" "No, he just said that our hospital doesn't deal with such cases and he should be transferred to the regional hospital." "He wasn't wrong about that. We've prepared a car for you." The boy was immediately taken to the intensive care unit. Laura begged to see her son, but the doctors were adamant. "Calm down, Mom. You can't do that. We have very strict rules. When the baby is better, you can visit him." But the woman wouldn't leave. In the morning, a tired Katie came to see her. "Laura, go home. You're only torturing yourself here. I'll take care of Jack. You may not trust me, but believe me, I care about your son. It just so happens God didn't give me any children, but this is our Vic's son. Maybe you'll never forgive me." "For what?" "Because my husband cheated on me with you, but he still stayed with me." Katie returned to the NICU, where a whole team of doctors was already working on the sick baby. "Colleagues, I'm begging you. Please do what you can for this baby. I need to get some rest." "Sure, Katie, we'll let you know." Vic was overwhelmed by the lingering grief. He looked at his wife, who had returned, and didn't know what to say to her. She came to his rescue again. "Vic, let's leave all explanations for later. Especially in such a situation, words will not help. But today, unexpectedly, I realized that I am ready to forgive you for your betrayal. I am even ready to share the pain with this poor Laura, whom you also betrayed so meanly." Already in a different voice, the man said, "You act honorably toward strangers." She pounced on him with fists. "Vic, take off that mask of hypocrisy. Strangers, how can you say that about your own child? If I said that, it would be understandable. But you're a father. Is your job more important to you? Your professorial reputation?" The man collapsed on the hallway floor and cried bitterly. "Katie, I don't know. I'm completely confused." Suddenly calm, Kathy said, "But I know what to do. It's your baby, which means he's precious to me too. Your Laura can't give the boy what we can." "Katie, what are you up to?" "You know the answer to that, and I think it's the right thing to do." Vic had nothing to say to his wife, and he agreed. At this moment, he was not thinking about Laura, who happened to get in his way and whose life he shattered. But the unhappy mother had no idea of the ordeal that awaited her. The next day, Laura came to see Anna. After listening to her, Anna stood up and said, "Laura, I want you to listen to me. I sympathize with your problems. I'm terribly sorry about your son, but you have to realize that we don't have anyone to work in your place. We're constantly having to ask you to fill in. You should quit your job." Laura shook her head. "I can't. You do realize that then we'd be completely lost with Jack." Anna stepped close to her. "Look, this isn't the time when that was possible. This is a different time. And I'm giving you 2 days. If you don't solve your problems, I'll just fire you on the spot, and then you can run around the courts and prove you're insane." "I understand, Anna." Laura walked quickly out of the office to keep from bursting into tears. She wanted to work, she really did. Was it her fault that things had turned out this way? When she arrived at the hospital, Jack had already been moved to a room. The boy was alone, sleeping all the time. Katie was sitting by his bedside. She was looking at Jack with such tenderness that Laura was once again amazed by this woman. "Hello?" Kathy looked up, staring at Laura for a long moment before answering. "Hello, Laura." Strange, she should hate this Laura, but she felt nothing but pity for her. "How is he, Kathy?" "Laura, it's not very good. It's more like very bad. It's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of time, and a lot of money to get Jack back on his feet." Laura looked at her with widened eyes and just didn't know what to say. "But I don't have any money. Jack and I have been living very modestly." Katie stood up and walked over to her. "Laura, I want to talk to you. I really hope you love your son enough to listen to me and evaluate the situation objectively." For some reason, Laura felt an uneasy feeling in her soul. She had completely forgotten that to Kathy, she was just someone her husband had cheated on her with. "All right, I'll try to listen to you." Katie closed her eyes as if gathering her thoughts. Years ago, when I wasn't married to Vic, yet I wasn't envied by many girls, almost all of them. I may not have shown it, but I walked around very proud. Well, happy too. We were already living together, though we weren't married yet. One day, those who Vic had turned down decided that I needed to be put in my place in life, and they started talking about my Vic cheating on me. I listened to everything with an impassive face, even though it took a lot of effort. I replied that I didn't believe a word of it, and I didn't need to hang out with people who spread gossip anymore. I just ran home and felt so bad that I was scared. My stomach was twisting. It hurt. Vic called an ambulance. It turned out that I had miscarried and would not be able to have any more children. Laura watched as tears streamed down Katie's cheeks. She felt sorry for this seemingly strong woman, but Laura didn't understand why she needed to know all this. Roma and I got married right away, and he didn't care what the doctor said. We loved each other, and that was the most important thing. But, as you can imagine, time has a way of putting things in their proper place. I couldn't look at the kids. I was working in a children's hospital at the time. Little children, who sometimes had to be saved literally, haunted me at night. I thought I was going crazy. Vic's a psychologist. You of all people should know that. He saw everything that was happening to me. I'm sure he wanted a baby as much as I did. But he never, ever talked about it first. We wanted to adopt from an orphanage. Yes, we seriously considered that option. But again, it was about me. I thought about it and I realized I couldn't do it. You see, that child would be a complete stranger to us. We wouldn't know anything about who gave birth to him, what kind of people he was, what kind of heredity he had, and even diseases didn't scare me. I'm a doctor myself, and I could have fixed a lot of things. Genetics, I had to come to terms with it. Sometimes when despair overwhelmed me to the point where it was hard to breathe, I thought I had to trick Vic. Vic and I would have a baby. At least Vic would be happy in this life. Morning came and I realized I didn't need it, because then Vic would be gone wherever his child was. I was sure of my husband, sure he would never cheat. And then you called. First, I was ready to kill him. Then I wanted to kill you. Then all those thoughts were replaced by the one thought that was most important to Vic. My Vic has a child, his flesh and blood, and that baby needs help. In the 2 days I was with Jack, I realized what a blessing it is to have such a little boy. Laura, Vic told me everything about the way he pushed you away and the situation you're in, and that you're not doing so well either. You can't handle it. You can't put your son back on his feet. You don't have the strength or the means to do that. I want you to understand. You're gonna ruin your son. No, I can do this. I'm not gonna let Jack die. Laura was crying. Katie sat across from her. Tell me, what are you going to do next? Jack must be taken to the capital, and from there, perhaps abroad. Where will you get the money? Let's think of something else, Katie asked firmly. Well, answer me not as a naive girl, but as a mother, as a grown woman. How are you going to save your son? Laura cried. She realized that everything Katie was saying was true. There was nothing she could do, nothing at all. Do you realize that we have to do something? And it has to be done very quickly. Laura nodded. Then I look forward to hearing what you have to say. There was silence in the room for a long moment. Katie stood up. I understand that you're hoping this will work itself out, but you're not a child, Laura. As a doctor, I can tell you that the worst is yet to come. Laura raised her head and looked at her tear-stained face. What am I going to do then? Katie stepped closer to her. Just let us take him away. Vic is, after all, his father, his own father, you understand. I've grown attached to Jack. I'll be a good mother to him. I couldn't do that with someone else's kid. Jack is Vic's son. We can take care of him. We have money. We have connections. We have everything you don't. You realize that the kid lived with his mother, and now he's just going to live with his father. We'll do everything we can to make the boy well, but you don't have to be around anymore. Laura looked at Katie with eyes full of horror. What are you saying? I'm not giving you my son. You're out of your mind. Katie leaned toward her. Am I crazy? You're my girl. You don't understand the real situation. I'll be you one day. Here's my number. Kathy handed Laura a business card and left the room. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it. She took a deep breath. How hard this conversation had been for her. But if she let go of unnecessary emotions, it was the only way she could be a little happier. Laura, she's helpless, spineless. She can't give Jack anything. She'll grow up to be some kind of plumber. Well, maybe a driver. Katie took a deep breath and headed toward the doctor's office. Doctor, may I? The doctor jumped up from behind his desk. Oh, Katie, why do you ask? Of course I can. Tea? Coffee? Doctor, I need to have a very serious talk with you. Sit down, I'm listening to you very carefully. Katie looked around. She went into the office and closed the door behind her. No, don't even ask. It's a felony. Katie clapped her hands together. If I'm not mistaken, you have a daughter, and as I recall, she's in trouble with the law, with drinking. The doctor froze and turned away. How do you know that? Your wife left you, and you have to take care of an alcoholic daughter, and an old mother who can barely walk. The doctor sank into a chair. Since we can't make a good deal, I'll have to make it so you can't work anywhere in this town. Although I really don't want to do that. You're a great doctor, a good, honest man. The doctor looked up at her. Tell me, why do you want to do this? I don't have children, and as you understand, I won't have any. This is my husband's child, an accidental liaison. This woman, his mother, can't give Jack anything, she can't cure him, and he will suffer on public assistance. We can give him whatever he needs. Understand, if you help me, you will make several people happy at once. The doctor looked at her. Laura, she'll be happier. Well, for one thing, she's already deeply unhappy. Do you think a mother who can't even buy her child sweets can be happy? And secondly, you realize that sometimes you can sacrifice one person to save a few. The doctor sat silent for a long time. Kathy didn't rush him. Finally, he looked up. I agree. I will do as you ask. Good. Get ready for the pulpit next week. Laura sat by her son's bedside all night. She just sat and looked at him, like she wanted to memorize every feature of him. In the morning, when it started to get light outside, she kissed him and left. I'm sorry, son. Remember that Mommy loves you very much. You mean everything to me. Yesterday, before they went to bed, the doctor came to their room. He sat down across from Laura. Doctor, what's wrong? I have some bad news. The diagnosis has been confirmed. Your son will have to undergo a very long and expensive treatment. It's the only treatment that can give him a chance. The doctor's gone. Laura looked at her son and whispered, That's it. It's all decided. She closed the door to the room, walked over to the nurse's station. Can I make a phone call? Yeah, sure. It's me. I'll take it. Laura hung up the phone and slowly walked toward the hospital exit. She had solved her problems. I've come to resign. What do you mean by that? Anna looked at Laura as if she was seeing her for the first time in her life. Are you offended? Well, don't be. The job's barking at me. I understand. I understand that when a child is sick, nothing else matters. Where's Jack, at the hospital? Well, if you want, we can get you a vacation. But it's unpaid. You realize you're on paid leave for the next 5 years. And then Laura couldn't take it anymore. No, I don't want a vacation. I don't want any more vacations. I understand. She burst into tears and rushed out of the principal's office. She didn't go home. It was unbearable to be there. She wanted to climb the walls. She wandered around the city until evening. When it began to get dark, she went to the park, sat on a bench, and began to howl and cry. She didn't know how much time had passed. She woke up to someone touching her arm. It would get better soon. Laura turned around. There was a woman sitting next to her, like a homeless woman. She held out a cup to her. There was some kind of liquid in the cup. Laura thought it was water. She grabbed the cup, drank it in one gulp, choked and coughed. It's okay. It's the first time. It's hard at first. Then it'll get easier. Laura felt a release. Her nerves didn't seem so tense anymore. Everything still seemed awful, but not to this extent. One more thing. Laura nodded. She hadn't realized that a strong drink could bring such relief. She looked at the homeless woman with interest. Well, what are you looking at? I used to cry and worry like that too. My husband found a young girl, took her out of the apartment and threw her out on the street. But then I realized I had a drink, and there was no more trouble. I would wake up feeling bad, but that was only until I drank again, and that wouldn't make it better. Laura drank some more and realized she still wanted to live. Yes, things were bad for her, but maybe there were people who had it even worse. A year later, Laura successfully sold her room. The neighbors were surprised that she, a friendly and decent woman, had disappeared. The police were called several times when Laura was visited by her new friends from the street. Eventually, when they found out she was selling her room, everyone crossed themselves. Jack came to his senses quickly, and after their family trip to the sea, he forgot he was ill at all. It hurt a lot that he didn't have his mom anymore, but Kathy's mom said that mommy is in heaven now and she's fine there. She is looking after Jack, so Jack had to be well behaved and do well in school. And he did. By 8th grade, it was clear that if Jack continued to be as determined as he was, they could get a gold medal. Kathy was even more proud of Jack than Vic was. One day, when they were already in bed, Vic said, "You know, sometimes I look at you too and I'm even a little jealous. Jack and I are blood relatives, and I love him very much, but I'm nowhere near the relationship you and he have." Katie sat up abruptly. "Don't you ever dare say that Jack isn't my blood relative. He is. He's my closest relative." Vic thought Kathy was going crazy, but she suddenly calmed down. "Vic, I understand everything, but sometimes I forget that Jack isn't mine. Please don't remind me of that." Vic put his arm around her. "You know, Kathy, you're the best to me. If I could turn back time, I'd marry you again." She snuggled against him and said, "Let's go to bed. We still have to make sandwiches for Jack in the morning." Vic playfully pouted and said, "What about me? Are you going to the cafe?" Vic laughed. He was ready to go to the cafe. He was even willing to eat nothing, just so he could go, and it would be okay. Sometimes he felt a pinch, but he quickly suppressed it. On the day of Jack's graduation, Vic was running late. Kathy called him several times. "Vic, I can't understand it. Your son is about to get a medal, and you don't seem to care." "Kathy, I'm stuck in traffic. I'm trying to get through, but it's completely gridlocked." Vic's been cut off. Vic, breaking all the rules, swerved across the double solid line, but he couldn't tell Katie he had a surprise for her and Jack. He drove toward the school with a screech of tires, almost hitting some homeless guy. He jumped out of the car and bumped into her. "Why the hell are you in the way?" She turned around. Vic met her gaze and froze. It was Laura. He shook his head. "Yeah, but this is bullshit. It must have been a mistake." That evening as they went to bed, Vic said to Kathy, "I saw some bums today." Kathy smiled. "You won't believe this, but I see them every day." "Kathy, it was Laura." Kathy jumped up. "I'm not 100% sure, but 99% sure." "Vic, you're imagining things." "Look, I wasn't imagining it." "Kathy, I'm all for it. As long as she's not here, there won't be a problem. You hear me? Let's not think about it anymore." About 3 months passed. Kathy scrutinized the faces of the women huddled around the garbage cans, but then she calmed down. Jack went to law school. Kathy was proud of her son. She was ready to be with him 24/7. But one day, the thing she feared most in the world happened. They were having dinner. Katie loved family moments like this. They didn't happen very often. Everyone was working. Jack was studying. "Mom, Dad, I've been meaning to ask you." "Go ahead, son." Vic looked at his son with a smile. The more Jack looked, the more he looked like him. Kathy laughed and said they even had the same gestures. "How come we never went to Mom's grave?" Vic coughed. The fork slipped out of Katie's hands. "Jack, why would we visit her? We don't even know where she's buried." "What, didn't you bury her?" "No, Jack, we were busy treating you at the time." "Could you have died? We never left your side." Jack nodded, and Kathy seemed to age 20 years at once, while Vic sat stunned. "Okay, Jack." As soon as her son left the table, Kathy lashed out at her husband. "You don't dare give him Laura's address, Vic." Vic grabbed her arm. "Listen to me. I'm sure Laura doesn't live there. Jack won't be able to find out anything. And if we start spinning lies, it's going to be very suspicious." Katie thought for a moment. "You know, you're right. Jack has some kind of weird feeling when he goes up to where he used to live." The door was opened by some guy. "Excuse me, please, the woman named Laura used to live here about 15 years ago." "So, I remember this room. I bought it last year when I got divorced. So I don't know any Laura, and I wouldn't advise you to look for women like that. They bring nothing but trouble." The guy slammed the door shut, and Jack sighed. "Well, where to go now?" Suddenly someone tugged on his sleeve. Are you looking for someone? An older woman stood next to him. Yes, I'm looking for someone. Perhaps you remember a woman named Laura who lived here. The old woman nodded. I remember. How could I have forgotten? Jack rejoiced. Maybe you can tell me where she's buried? The old woman looked at him strangely. Come with me. We'll have some tea. I have a feeling you're the same boy who was with Laura. In the room on the sofa, entangled in wires, sat a young girl. She jumped up, even dropping her book. Hello, and looked at the old woman in surprise. Lima, granddaughter, make us some tea. We need to talk. Jack watched the girl with amusement. She seemed to be from another world. Not a gram of makeup, although makeup would have only ruined her thick hair. She was wearing modern jeans, but they suited her well. Lima set the table and sat down, eyeing Jack with interest. I know you too. You're in law school too. Only a year ahead of me. That can't be right. If you went there, I'd remember you. Lima smiled, and Jack turned to the old lady. The woman paused for a moment and spoke. I'm the only one left from the old days. Someone moved away. Someone died. Laura, I remember her room. Some guy bought it. He used to come here sometimes, probably your father. Jack nodded. Laura was a good girl. What did she see in that old man? We never did figure it out. After that, she started disappearing. Sometimes for a couple days, sometimes longer. And then she was gone. So she wasn't here anymore. Then we found out for sure. And then she got really sick and probably died in the hospital. She started drinking. Jack sat staring at the old woman, not blinking, not moving. He had been told that his mother had died while he was in the hospital. And the old woman spoke as if she had died much later. Excuse me, are you sure you're not mistaken? I was told that my mother died when I was in the hospital. I sensed something was wrong when Laura started drinking. She was crying and screaming, saying her son had been taken away from her. Jack stared ahead. That couldn't be true. Maybe she'd been drinking even before the baby was gone. No, she wasn't there at all. She was a good one. About a year after the baby was born, she sold that room. She sold it. We'd all breathed a sigh of relief because we couldn't fight her and her friends anymore. Jack was in such shock, he just didn't know what to say. He needed to talk to his parents, to ask them all the questions. He wanted to understand why. He stood up. Thanks for the tea. I'll be off. Wait, I haven't told you everything yet. What else? She's not dead, your mother. I literally saw her outside our store 3 days ago, collecting money. She didn't look human at all. Apparently, Jack looked so scary that Lima was scared. Here, take some water and drink. He obediently took a few sips. Better? Yes, thank you. I'll go look for her. Lima jumped up. I'll go with you, wherever you go in this condition. Jack didn't say anything. Let her go if she wants to. They walked around the neighborhood, searching all the dumpsters, but they didn't find anyone even remotely similar. Jack turned to Lima. Thank you so much for keeping me company. Let me walk you out. And you won't look anymore? Of course I will. I'll come by tomorrow after school. Jack aggressively questioned his parents. The father was the first to give up. He told everything softly, not even looking at Jack. After his story, Jack stood up. How could you do that? She's a living person. Katie looked at him with tearful eyes. Mom, don't you understand anything? You just slandered a human being for your own benefit. With Lima, they searched for a week. Finally, the girl said, we're doing something wrong. Maybe she doesn't just live in this neighborhood. There are so many homeless people in the city, you can't get around them in a year. Besides, you don't even have a picture. What do you remember from your childhood? She could be completely different. Jack looked at her with interest. So what are you suggesting? A first-year student. I suggest we start the interrogations. Before we do that, we need to get the necessary paper. What kind of paper? Are you planning on becoming a lawyer too? Half a letter. At the store. They got strange looks when they took 5 bottles of vodka. At least an appetizer. Lima smiled widely. Are you kidding, Naughty? Appetizers steal the degree. The clerk snorted. Lima headed for the exit with a nonchalant look. Jack stood in the road for a while. Then he caught up with Lim. You're something. On the third bottle, or rather on the third bottle, you give to the bums. They found out there was a Laura just a week ago. She was hit by a car, drunk. Now she's in the hospital. But who treats the homeless these days? They're gonna send her to a shelter. She'll die there. Lima, I'm going to the hospital. What do you think? Would I let you go alone? Lima opened the door to the room. Jack immediately saw her voice and whispered behind her. Then she held out the shipping papers. Laura turned her head slowly. She looked at them for a long time, then whispered, "My son." Jack was in the hospital every day. Lima was busy restoring Jack's documents and solving other problems, medication, clothing, and where Laura would live after he was discharged. He only came home to change his clothes. Mom and Dad stared at him in silence, not giving him a chance to speak. He left quickly. Jack couldn't hate them because he loved them, but he couldn't be around them either. Laura was already starting to come to her senses. Jack realized, to his surprise, that his mother still looked very young after the days she hadn't been drinking. After a while, and it became apparent that she had once been very beautiful. "Jack, you look so much like Vic." "Yeah, I know, don't worry, I won't touch another drop. I swear to you. I believe you." There was a knock at the door. It must be Lima, your very good girl. But it wasn't her, it was Mom and Dad. Jack looked at them with amazement. Laura with fear. "Hello, Laura. Hello, Jack. Why have you come?" "Jack, we came to apologize to all of you and to ask you to raise Laura." Jack's right. Thinking of our own happiness, we just been mean to you. "No, you saved my son. He didn't need saving. The doctor's diagnosis was inconclusive. I made them say all that." Laura looked at them. There was so much pain in her eyes. "Why? Why did you do this to me? First Vic, then you." Katie wiped away her tears. "I'm sorry, Laura. I have nothing more to say." She handed the keys to Jack. "This is Dad's old apartment. We transferred it to you. It's 2 rooms. So what?" 6 months later, Lima, happy in a white dress, stood next to Jack at the registry office. There weren't many guests. Lima's grandmother, Laura, and a few friends. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The door swung open. Jack froze. On the threshold of the ceremonial hall stood a crying Kathy, and in Vic's hands was a bouquet of roses. Jack turned to Laura. "Mom, I'm sorry, I don't know how they found out." He really wanted to hug his parents. He missed them terribly, but he didn't want to hurt Laura. Laura gave him a gentle push forward. "Go on. I'm the one who told them. You mustn't hold it against them. They truly love you. You can do a lot for love." Jack took a few steps toward them. Katie rushed to him, hugged him, cried, then hugged Lima, then hugged Laura. "You're a golden person, Laura. Your soul is enough to hug the whole world."
Tim belonged to that category of people for whom personal image was paramount. Throughout his not very long life, he repeatedly made a stunning impression on others. And to achieve this high goal, the average entrepreneur used not only known, but even forbidden techniques. In other words, Tim did not disdain any tricks. Unfortunately, Lucy, late businessman, did not immediately realize with what a difficult man she decided to tie her fate many years ago. For almost 12 years of marriage, the woman has regretted it more than once. In moments of despair, she even mentally cursed the day when she met the businessman. Even now, when the burden of the theft suddenly fell on her shoulders, she sent her late husband only warm words. Though the young woman didn't really believe in telepathy, she relied on the power of her numerical message. Staring with a wandering gaze at her husband's portrait in a mourning frame, she sent him impulse after impulse. "Well, Tim, have you had enough? Did you think that like a fairy tale hero you could run away from everyone and hide? But it didn't work out. This time, life set a trap for you. Could you have imagined that you would be killed by a stupid accident in the prime of your life? You must have planned a beautiful exit from this earthly life. And then you took a banal turn, a dumpster. 2 fighting bums and the proverbial banana peel. It was the latter that played the fatal role." Tim had no idea that something inevitable would happen to him in a minute. When he was awakened in the middle of the night by a late-night phone call from his wife. "Lucy, I'm sorry if I woke you, but I'm here. I'll have to leave the car in the yard because I have to get up at 6 o'clock tomorrow." Suddenly, the animated tone was replaced by surprise. "What is this outrage? And guys, stop it. This harsh remark obviously did not apply to this Lucy, so Lucy got worried and asked, "Tim, what's going on over there? Who are you yelling at?" "Oh, nothing much. The local bums are sorting it out." "Wait, I'll go. I'll explain everything to them." The woman shouted into the phone, asking her husband not to interfere in someone else's squabbles. But he couldn't hear her anymore because he went to clean up. The man did not turn off his cell phone, and she heard the car door slam first, and then muffled shouts were heard. "Stop hitting each other. We don't know what happened. I'm going to call the police now if you don't calm down." Her husband's voice, which brought other sounds to her. Then everything suddenly went silent. The woman screamed into the receiver for several minutes. Tim, where are you? What's going on out there?" Since there was no response, Lucy went downstairs. The elderly concierge looked at her sternly. "Where are you going so late? It's almost 1:30 in the morning." Lucy threw something vague over her shoulder because her heart was already fluttering with a sense of anxiety. She rushed to her husband's car, hoping she still had time to warn him of the danger. The businessman's car stood with the door open. For a few seconds, the woman looked around in panic. "Tim, where are you?" A suspicious rustle was heard from the side of the garbage dump. She ran up just as the large man's body began to convulse. Lucy rushed over to the injured man. He even tried to smile despite his critical condition. "Lucy, be careful with the banana peel. Can you believe I slipped and hit my head on the edge of that metal thing? It's almost a classic situation." The man tried to lift his head, but cried out in pain and stopped. Lucy immediately remembered the first aid algorithm. She told her husband Tim not to move. "I'm going to call an ambulance now." Grabbing the cell phone lying on the driver's seat, the woman called an ambulance. The husband gestured for her to bend over. She lowered herself to the ground and took Tim's hand. "Hold on, don't go away. The paramedics will be here soon. Just don't pass out. Talk to me," he whispered quietly. "I'm trying, but I can't. I don't want to go." Just like that, without saying goodbye. A series of new convulsions ran through the man's body and he stopped moving. The last thing the husband said was, "Lucy, I'm sorry for everything that's happened. What's in store for you? Call and go where?" Lucy still held his strong hand. An ambulance siren wailed in the distance, but it was too late. Tim had died honorably and ignominiously by the garbage cans. The paramedics diagnosed an open head injury and called the police to the scene. When law enforcement officers arrived, Lucy had not yet fully realized what had happened. She recounted the events of the last 20 minutes in detail, stumbling over every phrase. The policeman, as if summarizing, asked, "So, apart from you, are there any other witnesses to what happened?" The woman did not have time to answer this question, as something suspiciously stirred behind the garbage cans. One of the operatives rushed to the container and pulled out a frightened homeless man. "Here's our comrade, Captain. We're incredibly lucky. We have one witness." The policeman couldn't resist. "Only he stinks so badly you can't breathe." The homeless man raised his head proudly. "Gentlemen, everything in this world is relative. And what smells bad today may become a trend or a flavor tomorrow." While everyone present tried to understand the depth of meaning of this phrase, the homeless man gained confidence. "We want to make ourselves known." The captain came to life. "And who are we? You weren't here alone." "Sure, we were with Max, doing our evening rounds and arguing a little, when this guy showed up." "Who's Max?" Homeless guy's got his shoulders back in the air. "This is my partner." He turned to the trash cans and made an expressive gesture with his right hand. "Max, come out. Let's tell it like it was. The police might think we killed the body. And we don't want that. We're honest citizens. We didn't plan any of this." The partner, a talkative homeless man, timidly crawled out of his hiding place. For about 5 minutes he listed his worthy qualities while remaining a witness, and only after the presentation began to tell about what had happened. "Yes, it was the boy's own fault. It's freezing in the evening, and it's just slippery here." A man in women's shoes suddenly got behind the wheel and crashed. He had the nerve to tilt the container over his head with all his might. "Max and I heard his skull crack." Max confirmed it. The typical bum's partner just nodded his head and continued his story. "We knew right away that something smelled like kerosene. A long time ago, I worked as a janitor in a hospital, so I saw some horrors there. We used to get barrels like this man's. We wanted to call 103, but we couldn't because this woman showed up. Of course, Lucy in those difficult moments was not up to the testimony of two homeless people. She continued to sit next to her husband, not paying attention to the cold and strangers. The ambulance paramedic gave her an injection, and the concierge quickly helped her get to the apartment. She kept telling her to cry, that it would make her feel better. But everything inside Lucy was petrified. She could neither cry nor scream, although the tragedy had happened less than 2 days ago. It seemed to her as if an eternity had passed. She sat by the coffin, emitting a bitter spirit. Suddenly, she felt someone push her. She looked at her husband's portrait and shuddered. It seemed to her that her husband's eyes in the portrait twitched. She felt sick for a moment and quickly looked away from the portrait, where Ariana stood with a mournful face. First, Lucy Tim. She caught her gaze and whispered distinctly, obviously hoping for the attention of the audience. "Hold on, dear Lucy, and don't forget that you are not alone in this difficult moment." A bitter tear glistened in Ariane's eyes, but she quickly brushed it away with a polished gesture. Lucy smiled to herself and thought without anger, Ariana in her usual role. Even from the funeral of her ex-husband, she managed to create a colorful show. And the young woman was not mistaken in her assumptions. After all, it was the first Lucy who organized a solemn farewell in the House of Folkart. The presence of a large group of journalists was also her initiative. However, Ariana did not find it necessary to consult with her on this matter. Simply that same evening, after Lucy's call, she firmly stated, "Lucy, don't worry, I'll take care of everything." The girl didn't immediately understand what she was talking about. "I don't quite understand you." A disgruntled sigh followed. "What's so difficult about it? We both had a loved one die, which means we need to take care of Tim's funeral. So I've decided to take charge of organizing that event, since you've apparently never done anything like this before. So I thought I'd lighten your burden a little." Lucy was uncomfortable with this woman's interference, and she even tried to respond to her with rudeness. "Ariana, I appreciate your help, but it is not always appropriate. In this case, it is definitely against common sense. As Lucy's legal guardian, it's my responsibility to take care of everything." Ariana laughed into the receiver, and Lucy's ears rang painfully. "Darlings, let's not cross swords at such a sorrowful moment. I'll tell you more, now that the reason for our opposition has itself fallen away. We might become friends. Think over my offer, and do not be in a hurry to refuse." The conversation was unpleasant to the young widow, and to get rid of the intrusive counselor, she answered in a colorless voice, "All right, I'll think it over. See you later. Oh, I almost forgot. Tim's farewell will take place at the House of Folkart." A wave of indignation swept through Lucy's mind again. "I think a more modest procedure would have sufficed. I can only imagine how much this setting would cost us." Ariana laughed again, but this time it was a sinister laugh that sent venomous goosebumps running down the young woman's spine. "Lucy, you're so naive. I told you I'm taking over the funeral arrangements, which means the hall rental and other expenses are on my conscience too." Lucy couldn't help herself. I wonder why the sudden generosity. And Ariana wasn't laughing anymore. There was a note of regret in her voice, much to Tim's surprise. "Unfortunately, I'm not altruistic. Tim has spoiled a lot of blood for me in his time. But there is one circumstance that got me involved in the process. But I don't think this is the best time to discuss the matter. The hour will come, and you will know everything." Lucy sat at the headboard of her husband's funeral bed and reflected on the events of the last 2 days. But strangely enough, she was most concerned about Ariane's behavior. This woman repeatedly intruded into their life together, without asking and without observing the basic rules of decency. But no matter how hard Lucy tried, she could not contain this insolent woman. When Ariana carelessly hinted that Lucy was experiencing the loss of a loved one for the first time in her life, she was 100 times wrong. The recently widowed woman was only 3.5 years old when she was orphaned. Lucy's parents, young doctors, decided to devote their long-awaited vacation to a sea voyage. They left their daughter in the care of her grandmother, who was strongly opposed to this kind of vacation. Why drag a child on a cruise ship? Who knows what kind of storms there might be? And Lucy would suffer from seasickness. Carlos thought his mother's fears were unfounded. "Mom, why do you always make such a big deal out of everything?" Many families with small children go on sea cruises and have pleasant experiences, and all you see is horror and danger, as if she had a premonition that something bad was going to happen. "As you wish, but I'm not giving you my granddaughter. Let her stay with me. Then my heart will be at peace." The couple had to accept this ultimatum, but it was obvious that the decision of the grandmother pleased them very much. Overheard, her son said to his future daughter-in-law Naomi, "We have a unique opportunity to relive our honeymoon." At that moment, the old woman only smiled and thought that she was ready for anything, as long as her children were happy. The young couple should have already returned from the trip when the country spread the terrible news that a few kilometers from the coast wrecked the ship. Admiral did not want to believe such terrible rumors. She hoped that this is just another hoax. But soon the news of the terrible tragedy was confirmed. Grandmother did not say anything to the little granddaughter because she was sure that her son and daughter-in-law are all right and they somehow survived. After all, their names were not on the list of the dead. They were considered missing. But as the days went by, no miracle happened. Despite her young age, Lucy vividly remembered the day she learned she no longer had a father and mother. It was September 1, and the town where her grandmother lived was celebrating the beginning of the school year with great enthusiasm. Explained to the excited girl, "Don't worry, Lucy, time flies. In 3 years, you two will go to first grade for the first time, and Mommy and Daddy will accompany you." During the day, they did not yet know about the tragedy. It became known in the evening, when the holiday was over and the wind scattered candy wrappers and burst balloons around the city. And there was a certain symbolism to it that Lucy realized later. Then, throughout her life, these innocent attributes of the holiday caused her unpleasant memories. She could not get used to the fact that she no longer had a father and mother. On long winter evenings, the girl sat at the window and asked the good fairy, "Please let my mom and dad come back. They didn't do anything wrong. They healed people." The girl believed in her grandmother's fairy tale that her parents had been bewitched by an evil wizard, so she asked the fairy to free them from the charms of the evil sorcerer. Watched this scene with tears in her eyes, but could not bring herself to destroy the hopes of the little granddaughter. After all, she was her best friend, woman, and colleague at work. One day she admonished her, "You shouldn't do that. The girl might go crazy. Tell her Carlos and Naomi are dead." Angelica replied, "I can't do that. I can't destroy the child's hopes. I still believe they are alive. But that's just self-deception. Oh well, so be it. It's easier this way." The grandmother gained custody of her granddaughter, even though Naomi's parents were against it. The bride's relatives blamed Carlos for everything that happened, and the old woman was terribly afraid that they would instill this theory into the still fragile consciousness of her granddaughter. The case even came to court, but in favor of the fact that she was much younger than Naomi's parents. Another strong argument was her science degree and increased benefits. Naomi's parents were simple laborers and earned little. Therefore, the court decided that it could provide its only granddaughter with a better standard of living. Since the case was decided not in their favor, the bride's parents severed all relations with. Only years later, when Lucy grew up, she visited them. And it was her grandmother who insisted on this visit. But she started the conversation from afar. "Lucy, you know that you also have grandparents, right?" The girl was very surprised at this familiarity. "Of course I know. There are lots of pictures of them in the album, but you said they don't want to know about us." The older woman looked embarrassed. "It's not that simple. When Carlos and Naomi died tragically, there was a misunderstanding between us and we stopped communicating." Lucy interrupted her grandmother. "But I'm at the age where I can say anything. It's not hard to guess that the two clans blamed each other for what happened. I'm right." The Trofimovs had to admit their granddaughter was right. "Yes, you're almost right. Naomi's parents blamed Carlos, your dad. They even tried to take you away from me. We even went to court. How awful. Turning a child into a trophy, nothing more horrible and humiliating," asked in a trembling voice. "Are you angry with me? I may have acted unjustly, but at that moment this decision seemed to me the only right thing to do." The girl looked at her grandmother, who was ready to burst into tears and say something stupid. "You are my dearest person in the entire universe." She hugged the elderly woman and then comforted her for a long time. "Grandma, Please don't cry. I realize that your actions were motivated by a desire to protect me. Perhaps if I were you, I would have done the same thing. I promise I'll come visit Grandpa Anthony and Grandma Nancy very soon. I just need to finish my exams and then I'll visit them. Lucy had long been concerned about her relatives, and she was anxious to rebuild the broken bridges for that purpose. The time of the student vacation was just right, and Lucy even worked extra practice hours so that nothing would interfere with her plans. After the death of her daughter, Naomi's parents moved to the village, where they settled in the ancestral home of Anthony's grandfather. In their lifestyle, the elderly couple found solace and attended church every Sunday. Lucy appeared unexpectedly, and the old people considered it a miracle. Grandmother Nancy fussed minute by minute around her guest. "Lucy, you don't know how happy Grandpa Anthony and I are. We saw you when you were very little." Grandpa Anthony nodded in agreement and sun bunnies danced in his eyes. "Yes, you were very little. You probably don't remember us, do you?" The girl saw hope in the old man's eyes for the first time in her life and lied. "No, Mel, I remember us coming to visit you. Only you didn't live in the village then, but in the city." "You're right," he said. "We had an apartment, but then we sold it." The man grew sad, but after a moment his eyes lit up again. "Lucy, do you remember Sarah?" The girl froze in amazement, trying to figure out what her grandfather was talking about. Apparently, Grandma Nancy realized that her granddaughter was afraid of offending them and came to her rescue. "By the way, that wooden horse was making a lot of noise. We almost got into a fight with the downstairs neighbors." There were hours of rocking on rocking horses, and this amusement was accompanied by a strong knocking noise. From the grandparents, the girl learned many interesting details from her early childhood. Lucy spent almost a whole month in the village, and it was the most wonderful time of her life, which she always remembered with nostalgia. When it was time to leave, the old people tearfully said goodbye to their granddaughter. "Lucy, don't forget about us. You can't even imagine what your arrival means to us. You showed up, and we took another deep breath." The girl made a solemn promise to her relatives. "You won't get a break from me before I come to visit you again." Unfortunately, the life of medical students is such that they do not know what tomorrow will bring. Lucy diligently kept in touch with the old people. She called them every week, wrote them affectionate letters. But for 2 years, there had been no opportunity to visit them in person. The opportune moment came unexpectedly when the girl was practicing before receiving her diploma. In those years in small settlements, there was an acute shortage of specialists, so the university administration decided to take an active part in solving this social problem. Future doctors were gathered in the assembly hall, and the dean himself made the following statement. "Dear colleagues, yes, today I address you as equals, and you have proved that you deserve such treatment. I hope that the professional fire that burns, not smolders in your hearts, will inspire you to new feats for the sake of people's lives." Usually the dean's speeches were shorter and more modest, but here he was so blatantly pompous. The young audience was surprised, and everyone waited impatiently for the dean to finish his speech. But the director's enthusiasm quickly waned, and in the final part, he simply but lucidly addressed everyone. "Guys, you know that in medicine, as in the army, what the command orders must be carried out without discussion. Today, there is a very tense situation with the availability of medical services in small settlements. Therefore, you will have to practice in rural areas and district hospitals." The hall immediately buzzed, and the dean lost the opportunity to reach the consciousness of the students. Many classmates openly expressed their indignation at this decision. Others were silently digesting the news, while still others were considering their options. How to escape? This is another commitment. There was another group of students to which Lucy belonged. The girl calmly accepted the prospect of becoming a village doctor. Right after the meeting, she walked into the office and said, "Send me to Colorado. I know for a fact that there is no doctor there, only one paramedic." The woman tasked with assigning students to practice sites was surprised. "It's nice that we haven't run out of volunteers. It's commendable that you came on your own. And by the way, you're the first. But don't get too carried away, girl, because there are cases when students first beat their chests and swear that they are ready for any hardship, and then come here in tears and ask to be transferred to a more comfortable workplace." Lucy assured the woman, "Don't worry, I won't cry and complain. The woman looked at her again with an attentive gaze and entered the necessary information into her list. Having received a referral to the regional office of the Ministry of Health, Lucy began to prepare for the trip. She decided to surprise her relatives and did not inform them of her imminent arrival. I must say that the surprise turned out to be very impressive. When Lucy appeared on the threshold of the apartment with 2 suitcases, her grandmother grabbed her heart and burst into tears. "My little girl, something's happened. You were expelled from the university?" The girl realized that she had made an unforgivable mistake by putting her grandmother's health under stress. She tried to correct this mistake. "Grandma, it's okay. I was not expelled. I'm here for my internship." Lucy froze, hoping to make her grandmother laugh, but she was still in shock and looked reproachfully at her granddaughter. "How can you scare an elderly person like that? You could have warned her about your coming, for decency." The grandmother walked for a few minutes with a resentful look, helping the guests to distribute things. Then she looked fondly at Lucy, "My favorite granddaughter. And I didn't even believe that I would live to see this day." Lucy, as a child, hugged her grandmother and closed her eyes. "Lucy, what are you saying? You taught me to believe and not to give up until the end. And I've always followed that code to the letter. Besides, your joy is a little premature, because I'm not here for good." She didn't hide her disappointment. "I thought, darling, my internship will last a few months, so we'll have plenty of time to socialize." The old woman cheered up again. "Did they send you to our neighborhood hospital?" "No, grandmother, we have such beauty." The girl hugged Anna. "We again. That is, me and my classmates had the high honor of saving rural medicine. I'm going to Colorado. The situation there is catastrophic." Lucy braced herself for her grandmother's tears, but to her surprise, she was delighted. "So it's in the same piece of Pompeii. Does that mean you can stay with Grandpa Anthony and Nancy? I was going to visit them for a month too." It was time for Lucy to be surprised. "Wow. Did I miss something? Since when did you two start visiting each other?" "Friends." The old woman looked meaningfully at her granddaughter and said proudly, "And since I sent you to them. You have your own affairs in the capital. You have no time to deal with us old people. And we, by the way, miss you very much and worry about you. In situations like this, it's best to stick together. The Saints used to come to my birthday party, but now they've invited me to their house." Anthony, in order not to be bored, got busy with the bees. "As a doctor, you must know that spring honey is the healthiest, so I agreed to volunteer to be a taster. Maybe I won't die after tasting it." Lucy listened to her grandmother's emotional story and did not understand what puzzled her more, the fact of establishing contacts or the speech filled with village words. She couldn't resist making a remark. "Wow, you surprised me. Where did you pick up such expressions?" The old woman didn't even bat an eye. "And I like it, because every dialect has its own unique verbal expressions. If you want to reveal the genesis of people living in a certain territory. Yes, you got an amazing and incredible mixture of biology and philology," playfully winked at granddaughter Lucy. "That's what our people are based on." The girl decided not to enter into unnecessary arguments, and it is unlikely that such a duel would end with her victory. Perhaps the news of the reconciliation of the two sides was the most joyful of the day. And at the end of the week, Lucy went to the place of her internship, as promised, also moved to the village for the summer. Thus, the elderly relatives created a strong support for their beloved granddaughter. After all, the novice general practitioner had no time even for a quiet lunch. As soon as the local population learned about the appearance of the young doctor at the paramedic station, crowds of sick and just curious citizens flocked here. Lucy did not refuse anyone because she had no moral right to do so. People often knocked on her door in the middle of the night and asked for help on weekends. One Sunday morning in August, Ariana came to her in a luxurious foreign car. From that day on, the girl's life took a sharp turn, and the main priorities shifted from public interests to personal ones. Experienced people say that in order to become a real soldier, you need to withstand the first battle with dignity. This military truth finds confirmation in medicine as well. Just for a month of work in the village medical station, Lucy learned a lot of things that she had not even suspected before. But the main conclusion the young doctor made in the first few days: life is not as it is described in textbooks. She had been warned about it by a paramedic who had been carrying the burden of the problems of a rural institution on her shoulders for many years. Perhaps it was that burden that sometimes drove Jacob to drunkenness. On her first day on the job, Lucy smelled the odor of alcohol coming from her older colleague. Noticing her grimace, the man said cheerfully, "Yes, I know I'm not a very pleasant odor, but that's just a side effect of the previous evening. I don't indulge in strong drinks on weekdays." But the smell in the paramedic's office. The girl realized that he celebrates holidays almost every day. Since she was a temporary person in the rural health facilities, she decided to ignore the habit of the older comrade. Jacob started his internship in an unusual way. He decided to talk a little about the works of a great classicist. "Lucy, did you notice that I have the same name as a literary genius?" Most likely, the man expected the girl to be embarrassed, but she answered without hesitation. "Of course. It is impossible to pass by such a similarity indifferently. But despite all the problems that exist today, you are still more fortunate than Michael." Jacob was puzzled. "I wonder what that luck is." "Everything. You can't deny that today's conditions are much better than they were at the end of the 19th century. The paramedic crossed his arms across his chest. "Really, Lucy, you've cracked me up. I can see that you are not only good at medicine, although it is known that the writer also liked to drink and prod. But Michael wasn't prone to excess and always kept to moderation." Jacob raised his hands in surrender. "I give up. I can't argue with you. I have to admit that it would be a pleasure to work in tandem with such an intelligent and, moreover, beautiful girl." Throughout her years of study, Lucy had been diligently accumulating knowledge. However, despite the extensive knowledge she had gained at university, the young specialist felt insecure in her first days. That is why Jacob was always there to support the young doctor in case of difficulties. He spoke several times a day. "Don't doubt it, Lucy. I am below your rank, but experience is a great thing. In my field, I can make a diagnosis simply by breathing and pulse. I know everything about every patient. People trust me. I value that trust very much." As the first days of the appointment showed, the paramedic exaggerated these assurances. Visitors flocked, but everyone was eager to get to the young doctor. At first, this nickname in the style of Allah annoyed the girl, but she quickly got used to this treatment. Lucy also got used to the constant absences of her older companion. The first time Jacob asked her, his eyes glittering suspiciously, "Lucy, could you cover for me for a couple hours?" She answered without hesitation. "Sure. Do you have any problems?" The man was slightly embarrassed and muttered, "Yes, there are some domestic difficulties." "Well, you mind your own business and I'll handle the reception alone. Are you sure we won't have an inspection today?" Not a week later, Jacob made the same request again, but this time he was a little more brazen. "Lucy, I need your help one more time." "Are you in trouble again?" The paramedic grinned. "Not again, but still. I guess I'm just unlucky or something. Trouble just keeps coming at me. Before I can even deal with one problem, another one comes knocking at the door." My wife's mother showed up unannounced. The girl shrugged her shoulders in surprise. "It seems to me that when relatives come to visit, it's a joyous occasion. But this relative can spoil everything. And believe me, there is no joy from her, only trouble." The paramedic thought his joke was a good one and burst into laughter. Lucy did not share his cheerful mood, thinking his colleague's remark inappropriate. She said indifferently, "All right, Jacob, I'll let you go." Some time passed, and the paramedic disappeared again without warning. It was the height of the rowing season when suspected poisoning was on the rise among patients who could get to the paramedic station on their own. Lucy took calls on the spot in between waves of patients and also had to cycle to neighboring villages. It was in this real-life situation that an expensive foreign car pulled up to the paramedic station. "Ariana." She threw Lucy a condescending glance. "So you're the new doctor?" "Yes, that's me. If you have an appointment, come into the office." The visitor laughed. "Well, I'm not really worried about my health. I'm fine because, unlike some people, I don't eat junk food." To speed things up, the doctor asked, "Has anyone close to you been sick?" The woman raised her perfectly straight eyebrows disapprovingly. "Well, how should I put this? I don't even know the right way to say it. My ex-husband ate something and now his stomach hurts. I wanted to call an ambulance, but my neighbor said it was useless. She advised me to come to you. I understand. Just a moment. Wait. I'll pay for the emergency kit. Tell me your address. I'll be there shortly. We are located off Chicago, Building B, Chicago. Lucy froze. But Chicago is not in our neighborhood. Seeing Lucy heading back with the kit, the visitor stirred. The arrogance disappeared from her leathery face, and she even grabbed Lucy's arm. Doctor, dear Lucy, don't leave me in this difficult situation. Understand that someone very close to me is in critical condition right now. The woman looked at her pleadingly and Lucy felt uncomfortable. Okay, I will examine your patient. You said your spouse ate mushrooms. The woman smiled obediently and corrected the doctor. Yes, my ex-husband loves culinary experiments, and it's useless to tell him that it's very dangerous. I have a car, I'll take you there and then bring you back. Already sitting behind the wheel, the woman introduced herself as Ariana. But you can call me Ariana. I don't mind. I can't stand conventions at all. Our society has a distorted view of family relationships. I completely reject all conventions. Ariana was an experienced driver. She felt confident even on a bumpy country road. Lucy watched with admiration as she deftly maneuvered around potholes and bumps. But the new acquaintances did not pay attention to such trifles and continued to tell the young doctor about the peculiarities of their family life. My husband and I have been divorced for 5 years, but we have managed to keep good relations. We have a business together and our friendship has a positive effect on our business. Lucy was about to say something neutral when the woman interrupted her. We're almost there. See that 2-story cottage? That's our country house. After the divorce, we didn't divide the property like some people do. We decided it would be much easier to live together. Lucy couldn't resist asking, and how do you manage that if it's no secret? It's very simple. We set up a visiting schedule so we don't overlap on the grounds. Tim, that's my husband's name, comes here on certain days. I stick to my schedule too. And if there are any special situations that arise that go beyond the schedule, that is also easily solved. You just need to inform your companion about force majeure. But Lucy had no personal experience of married life. Her grandparents adhered to completely different principles. Therefore, she could not judge other people's family life. Although Ariana surprised her with her frank story, the girl quickly turned her attention to her professional duties. Entering the spacious lobby on the first floor of the house, she immediately asked, "Can you please tell me where I can wash my hands and then escort me to the sick man?" The owner of the house, Sophia, escorted the doctor to the bathroom and waited for her to wash her hands before handing her fresh towels. The patient was in a small room on the first floor. Ariana opened the door and announced in a tragic voice, "Tim, I brought the doctor. Get ready to be examined." In the room, Lucy could barely make out a man lying on a pile of pillows. She asked the landlady to pull the curtains open. "Please, the curtains. It's so dark and stuffy in here." And she hurriedly complied with the doctor's request. Sunlight flooded the room and the man frowned. "I could slap you," Lucy reassured him, "but then you'd die." "What are you complaining of?" "Weakness, severe nausea. I was sick last night too, and my stomach hurts. Walking doesn't hurt much." Watching the examination from the sidelines, Ariana decided it was time to speak up. "Doctor, without an examination, I can tell you that Tim has food poisoning. Yesterday, they all went to the woods together, picking different mushrooms and then had a picnic in the yard." Suddenly, the man interrupted the woman very abruptly. "What kind of nonsense are you talking about? You are misleading the doctor. We were alone under a birch tree, picking hogs, and these are elite mushrooms." He looked hopefully at the doctor. "And I ate only a little of the fish soup. My stomach was bothering me before that. I thought maybe I'd lifted something heavy." Lucy asked the patient to lie still. "We're going to check your stomach now." She didn't even have time to touch that part of his body before the man cried out in pain. Lucy looked at Ariana meaningfully. "It appears your patient has acute appendicitis." The woman frowned disapprovingly. "Are you sure?" The doctor calmly replied, "No, but all the symptoms point to it. We'll have to call an ambulance, because in cases like this, delay could cost lives." Ariana's former self-confidence returned to her. "What are you talking about? You're trying to scare us. You have no experience, so I don't trust you." "Why did you call me in then?" Lucy grabbed her kit and headed for the exit, holding her right side. Tim jumped up from the bed. In a burst of emotion, he even raised his hand at his ex-wife. "What kind of person are you? Do you really want me to die here from appendicitis? Let's call an ambulance." He caught up with Lucy already in the hallway. "Doctor girl, don't run away. I can't catch up with you." The girl stopped. "Sick. Do you really think it's better not to make unnecessary movements?" The man couldn't stand straight, so he bent over, writhing in pain. "You're making me run after you. Please don't leave me alone. Honestly, I'm afraid my ex Lucy won't call an ambulance because of her principles." Tim looked around. "I should have arranged it with her beforehand and then called the doctor." "Where's your phone?" The man holding his side pointed to the coffee table. "Here's a reliable satellite device." Lucy had experience with such devices and dialed the emergency number. Soon an ambulance arrived, and the doctor had to go with the patient to the district hospital, as the owner of the house refused this mission. Ariana felt insulted. "I can see that my presence is not necessary." She kissed the man's hand with ostentatious tenderness as a sign of protection. "I will not be silent," and waved her hand from the porch. "Tim is recovering. If I have a moment to spare, I'll be sure to visit you." The man sighed bitterly. "Doctor, imagine I've lived with that snake for over 10 years. Perhaps he expected words of sympathy, but the girl was silent. They didn't say a word to each other until they reached the hospital. From the emergency room, the patient was quickly transferred to the operating room. The doctor on duty praised Lucy. "You did well, colleague. You worked quickly and correctly diagnosed the patient." The praise somewhat embarrassed Tim, and she even tried to justify herself. "But it's just appendicitis. Even a second-year student wouldn't misdiagnose it." The doctor on duty shook his head. "You are deeply mistaken. Like any other disease, appendicitis likes to disguise itself. So consider yourself lucky today." Consider that luck an accomplishment. The appendix literally burst in the surgeon's hands. Another half hour and we would have had peritonitis. After saying that, Lucy couldn't just go back to Colorado. With the surgeon's permission, she visited the patient. Tim's face was paler than a sheet, but he was smiling. "Tell me, what's your name?" "My visitor?" Lucy. "Thank you, Lucy." He kissed her hand, and that kiss burned with fire until the evening. The next day, the girl remembered the sick man she had saved and his kiss. Even Jacob noticed the girl's strange behavior. "Lucy, what's the matter with you? You're glowing. I would have thought you were in love." Lucy caught his co-worker's eye. "Jacob, you have a strange idea. Unfortunately, love is not a small thing, but the ultimate reward." Lucy looked at the paramedic in surprise. "Those are just pretty words. In real life, it's different." Jacob only smiled, but he kept his opinion. A little time passed, and the girl changed her views on love and life. After being discharged from the hospital, the businessman with a talking surname went into the paramedic station to once again express his gratitude to the young doctor. He did it beautifully and pompously. First, he scattered snow-white roses on the porch. And then right from the porch, he made a fiery speech praising the humble village doctors who selflessly saved the lives of ordinary people. The residents of nearby houses gathered to watch this colorful performance, and Tim, surprised by the speed of the grapevine, was impressed. Tim's show was spectacular, and it couldn't have been more different. After all, improvisation was the businessman's favorite skill. During the years of hard life, when there were only piranhas and hyenas around you, the man excelled in this art. However, the modest inhabitants of the small village were content with more modest spectacles, even on television, so they almost clapped their hands with delight, and the elderly matrons even wept secretly. How beautifully he arranged everything, just like in the movies. How lucky our doctor. Delighted sighs came to Lucy, and she even mentally noted that the villagers recognized her as their own. To realize this sense of community was as pleasant for the girl as watching Tim. Lucy had never felt such strong emotions in her life. At those moments, she was insanely happy and thought that such a man could only be a dream. If I were lucky enough to meet such a man, I would love only him for the rest of my life. Perhaps it was at that very moment that her thoughts were poetically transmitted to the fairies she believed in as a child. The sorceress, with the help of her all-powerful wand, instantly turned the girl's life around after an epic performance on the shabby porch of the village dad. Tim decided not to waste any time and immediately proposed to this Lucy. The girl accepted without a second thought. She did not even suspect that the businessman fully coordinated this important step with his first wife. The main feature of their marriage with Tim was his ex, Lucy Ariana. When Lucy saw her rival's name on the guest of honor list at their wedding, it caused her sincere indignation. "Tim, I'm sick of this. It's like your ex Lucy is everywhere. You can't even hide from her at night. I wouldn't be surprised if one day your Ariana crawls out from under the bed at the most intimate moment." The man listened to Lucy, smiling guiltily, and answered Lucy calmly, "You and I are modern people, so it is not appropriate to start our life together with scandals and quarrels. I can tell you one thing. Ariana has done a lot. Basically, she made me a prominent figure in the business world. And although our marital relationship has long since cooled, we try to maintain business ties, and that's worth a lot," the girl wryly remarked. "I can't judge, because I have completely different values." At that moment, she was most surprised not by her husband-to-be's statement, but by the way Tim uttered this monologue. The man said it all in a calm tone, but made it clear that Lucy's opinion did not matter much to him. The girl decided not to aggravate the situation before the wedding, but after the celebration, such episodes were repeated regularly. Very soon, Lucy realized that her opinion and feelings do not need anyone, because her husband consults with his first wife on all important issues. Ariana could show up at their new home at any time. Without any shyness, she gave advice to young Lucy of her ex-husband. Acquaintances even admired the nobility of this woman. "Ariana is the epitome of decency. Our planet counts on women like her. Where else can you find such an example of self-sacrifice without any selfishness?" She helped her ex-husband's young lady-in-waiting. Lucy herself, as well as her elderly relatives, did not share such enthusiasm. The old people were horrified by the news that their granddaughter is marrying a capital city businessman. Anna, in duet with Nancy's grandmother, recited for days on end. "Lucy, this is crazy. I don't understand what this man has done for you. We've lived long lives, and we know that hasty marriages don't lead to anything good." Baba Nancy nodded vigorously at first, topped with a sly wink, and then decided to put in her weighty word. "Yes, girl, she's right. Think to yourself, what's the age difference? After all, your Tim is 17 years older than you. He's like a father to you." At that moment, the women were firmly interrupted by Grandpa Anthony. "Nancy, what does age have to do with it? It's normal. It's good to have a husband much older than his wife. This Tim is an established man, and he's not going to bother his parents. Personally, I'm more concerned about something else." Grandma didn't like to be interrupted. She pressed her thin lips together disapprovingly and glared fiercely at her husband. "Do you really have to interfere? I know perfectly well what's bothering you." Grandfather realized that the conversation is taking an undesirable turn and peacefully asked the crook to remember the proverb. "He who remembers old times, woe to him." "You, Anthony, better watch your eyes. We're telling the truth. Actually, this whole thing is very suspicious. I mean, this Ariana, sticking her nose in everything. Our women told us how she tried to set her own rules in the village, but she was quickly put in her place. I didn't like that either. I can't even imagine a situation like this where the ex-husband and Lucy are so close. They practically live together. I'm trying to understand why Tim would want that. He married a young girl for the second time." Grandma Nancy's eyes bulged with horror. "Oh, saints. Maybe they're in cahoots, plotting some kind of scam. Listen to this nonsense." Lucy had no more strength. She laughed merrily. "Grandmothers, you'll end up calling the emergency services because of this. Simply because here, far away from civilized life, other customs reign. That's why you find it wild that ex-spouses are on friendly terms. And age has nothing to do with it. Grandpa Anthony is right. A mature man is much more reliable than a green youth." Both grandmothers simultaneously looked at her granddaughter, but said nothing. Only after the wedding, with undisguised sadness in her voice, said, "Lucy, a strong man beside you. That's good, but often such people close themselves off from others. I'm very afraid you'll lose yourself, sitting in your husband's shadow." And I also want to tell you not to let this woman, you know who I'm talking about, commanding you in your own home." The girl knew her grandmother had a keen sense of foresight. She remembered the warning and tried to resist her husband's influence, but it didn't last long. The first line of defense collapsed when Tim demanded that his young wife quit her job a few months after the wedding. "Lucy, I need a calm and loving Lucy. With your shifts and late-night commutes, that's not gonna happen. That's why I insist you quit your job." Lucy tried to object. "Tim, I can't live without a job. I spent years studying to become a doctor. My parents also devoted themselves to this noble profession." The businessman wrinkled his nose in disgust. "Lucy, this is getting unbearable. You're always talking in Soviet-era slogans. Your old folks really pumped you up. But times have changed now. You are my Lucy, and I am able to provide for you and our future children." The day after this conversation, Ariana showed up unannounced. From the expression on her face, Lucy realized that she had something to say to her. And that hunch was confirmed as they drank tea together. First, Tim informed her knowledgeably. "I didn't want to tell you, Lucy, but our marriage to Tim broke up for many reasons. But chief among them was my reluctance to quit my job. At the time, I was just starting to get my career off the ground. I had a good position and a high salary. Plus, I had a son. You probably didn't know that Tim, as they say, took me in with child." Lucy looked at her interlocutor in surprise. "No, I didn't know. I thought Robert was Tim's son. He even has a middle name." Ariana waved her hand carelessly. "I insisted that my husband adopt the boy. Robert's father was not of good character, and he wasn't interested in his son from the start. Tim did his best to make sure the boy didn't lack parental love, and I'm very grateful to him for that." "Then why did you get divorced if everything was fine?" Ariana looked at Lucy strangely. "You seem to be an educated girl, don't you understand? Tim really wanted to have a child of his own. Over the years, that desire became an obsession, and I got in the way of those plans." "How?" "Very simply, I couldn't have any more babies, or rather, at first I didn't want to, because my career was more important to me. And then I was sure that one child was enough for complete family happiness. But one day my career collapsed. On top of this unpleasantness, I found out that previous miscarriages had made me infertile. Listening to the confessions of my husband's ex-wife, Jane, was not very pleasant, and she tried to avoid the subject. But apparently she decided to make light of the situation. When Jane and I met, he was like a helpless chick, and I was already a hawk. I had connections and money, and I willingly invested it in my husband, hoping to get something in return in time. That admission shocked the young woman. "So Tim owes you everything. And that doesn't bother you at all?" "Not at all. Some people sell their souls to achieve their goals. Others work until the grave. It's up to each man to choose what's best for him." Lucy thought that this woman with her cynical attitude to life is terrible. In the evening, when her tired husband came home, she said, "Tim, if it's necessary for our family happiness, I'll quit my job at the clinic, especially since soon there will be an addition to our family. Just please don't say anything and leave." Her husband pulled her into his arms and spun her around in a dance. When the initial emotions had subsided a bit, Tim asked, "So why did you suddenly change your attitude towards your uncle?" Lucy replied, "Not all at once. It didn't happen all of a sudden. I didn't like that woman from the beginning. There is something mysterious and even sinister about her. I think you're exaggerating, though there's some truth in your observations. I myself have long been weighed down by this union, but unfortunately I can't do anything about it because you are a creation of your ex-wife." "I am right." The man sighed heavily. "Part of it was. The entire business, all the finances and real estate are registered in Arian's name. If I end our relationship, I'll be left with nothing. But then Ariana has a lot to lose, something like that. In short, she has all the paperwork, or rather her lawyer, who basically controls everything. Can't anything be changed?" "Not at the moment." "Oh yes, very clever and perceptive. She's thought of everything, and to make sure nothing happens that she can't control. She's got me under her control too, Tim. So I too have been controlled by your ex-wife against my will. Admit it, she encouraged you to marry me." The man looked away and coughed. It was a sign of confusion, but Lucy decided to press him. "Tim, don't be sarcastic. I repeat the question. I too am under Arian's control. Tim sighed helplessly. I'm sorry, but it just happened. I didn't want to upset you, but before we got married, Ariana made me sign a document in which I turned over full control of the company to her. Just in case something happened. I hope you understand. Oh my God, but it's like involuntary servitude. Tim, let's go somewhere far away. You're smart and resourceful, and you can make your own life. I can and I will when the time comes. Lucy realized that there was a hidden meaning in her husband's words, that he had some plan, but she did not want to pester him with questions because she was tired of the intrigues in which she had to plunge after the wedding. Days and months flew by. Twins Billy and Steve were born on time and healthy. The happy father sat for hours under the maternity ward windows and acted like a little boy. Ariana didn't show up until the day the babies were discharged. The appearance of this woman spoiled the mood of Anthony's grandparents, who, despite his age and ailments, was eager to go to the capital. The old man regretfully noticed the appearance of this witch. It was a pity he had forgotten to put garlic in his pockets. Oh yes, I heard the old man's remark, but only whispered back with slumbering ignorance. I don't know what to talk about with such people. You cursed root. What a lady we have here. You should mind your own business and stay out of other people's families. Why are you picking on the guy? As if he's your property. Serfdom was abolished a century and a half ago under the Tsar. Lucy later found out about the dispute. If she hadn't intervened, there would have been a fight outside the maternity ward. Her grandmother tried to calm the outraged intruder. She said as gently as she could, Ariana, why did you come? Why are you disturbing people? Let your ex-husband live in peace. It's time to realize and accept that he is not your property. He is a free man. And she threw the bouquet of roses into the snow and muttered something unintelligible. I walked to the parking lot. I guess she expected Tim to run after her, but he didn't even move. Grandpa Anthony looked sadly at his son-in-law. Be strong, my boy. Women like your Ariana do not forgive offenses. Don't you want to move to another town for a while? And don't leave an address. The couple decided to follow the old man's advice and soon settled in the apartment. Of course, this move was incomplete because Tim could not leave his business. He regularly traveled to the capital and often stayed there for several days. This arrangement suited Lucy, but when her grandmother died, the young woman realized that she could no longer stay in the apartment where everything reminded her of her loved one. She decided to sell the apartment as she was constantly busy with her children. She entrusted her husband with the task. They quickly found a new, more spacious apartment. Lucy again entrusted the transaction to her husband. The woman did not pay much attention to the fact that her husband registered the new apartment in his name. Only after almost 10 years she bitterly regretted her frivolous attitude to such important issues. Almost 12 years of married life flew by like a blink of an eye. During these years, the family has experienced both joys and sorrows. Lucy more than once thought of divorce, but now, after the tragedy, all the disagreements and disputes she considered unimportant trifles. The woman again felt the unfriendly gaze and looked toward Arian and Robert. Her stepson was literally drilling her with his gaze, and his mother was smiling hypocritically. The widow sensed something in those hostile glances that made her wary, for she had studied the character of her predecessor well enough. Ariana was clever and resourceful. She did nothing without reason. She was also a mysterious woman and loved ambiguity. Lucy remembered how in yesterday's phone conversation, she had specifically hinted at some circumstances that would change everything after the funeral. It made the girl tense up. All the rest of the day, she thought about her fate and the rival shenanigans, and these thoughts did not give her peace even after the funeral service. Emotions overwhelmed her, and she herself did not notice how she said aloud, "That old witch, she's definitely up to some mischief. She smells like a skunk." As these unpleasant epithets were uttered rather loudly, Billy, the elder of the twins, became an unwilling witness to this passionate speech. "Mom, it's not nice to express yourself like that. And eavesdropping is a bad habit, too. You were yelling so loud it was impossible not to hear. I suppose Aunt Ariana finally got to you." "Billy, what kind of slang is that? I'm taking after you. Now all we have besides you is ourselves. Ariana doesn't count because she's not family." "Yeah, well, to be honest, my brother and I can't stand her. Lucy paused for a second and sighed. I don't like her either. Lucy sank back into her thoughts while her son watched her absent-mindedly chopping cabbage. The woman thought sadly that her husband's death didn't seem to have affected the boys much. They took the sad news surprisingly calmly, and at the funeral, they didn't even shed a single tear. Of course, such indifference caused her mother surprise and fear. Lucy thought it was the perfect moment to point this fact out to her 10-year-old son. Billy, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think your father's death made any impression on you or your brother. The boy looked into his mother's eyes and philosophically remarked, Man is mortal, and we all find ourselves on the other side of reality sooner or later. Daddy didn't die, he just passed into another world. The woman hugged her child. You've been reading a lot of nonsense and fantasizing. It's easy to talk about parallel worlds when you're not burdened with responsibilities. The son interrupted impatiently. Do you think things will be different for us now? Of course, it's going to be very difficult without Daddy. In the kitchen, behind Steve's back. Quiet. You guys were yelling so loud I heard everything. The boy walked around the table and approached his mother. On the other side, Mom, you don't even have to worry about the hardship. After all, Billy and I are here and can protect you. Daddy taught us that men are supposed to protect the weak and women, and Billy and I are real men. You are my protectors. The young mother's concern touched their hearts and tears ran down Lucy's cheeks as she hugged the boys. I hope we won't be lost with you. It's too bad our grandparents aren't alive. We have no one. I can't even imagine what we will live on. Steve consoled his mother. Now, legally, all the business and property will pass to us. We are the heirs. The boy wanted to add something else, but suddenly blurted out, Billy, Steve, you're so naive. You forgot about Arian's aunt who ran away from Arian. Steve continued to chuckle, so no one would know about her. She got tangled up in her kimono. The boys exchanged glances and burst into laughter. Their mother had to scold them. Children, I think you picked the wrong time to joke around. Have you forgotten that your father is dead? Billy looked at her ingratiatingly. We can't cry all the time. The funeral's over, and we all have a life to live. Believe me, Dad would have told you the same thing. Remember, he didn't like sour faces. Lucy smiled. Yes, your father was a man of good cheer. The pleasant memories came flooding back into the woman's mind, and at that moment the phone rang. The twins exchanged glances, and Steve rushed to the door with an exclamation. Surely that bloody aunt must have come to see us. Lucy hurried after her son into the hallway, where Ariana was already standing with a disgruntled look. Lucy, you need to get down to the business of raising your sons. I'm sure Tim would not approve of this behavior. The guest grabbed Steve's arm and looked at him disapprovingly. Can you talk about adults like that? Who taught you bad language, boy? The boy jerked his hand away. And who taught you to grab other people's children? You have a son of your own? Then grab him. Lucy felt uncomfortable, though she was not pleased with the guest's appearance. Children, go to your room. We need to talk to Aunt Ariana. The twins wandered off and headed for the children's room. Ariana followed them with a scratchy look. The tomboys are like a cartoon, two peas in a pod. How will they live without their father now? It's okay. We'll get through this temporary hardship. Come into the kitchen. I am cooking and busy. The guest followed the hostess. For some time, both women were silent, but this pause resembled a preparation for a major battle. The young widow sensed that an unpleasant conversation awaited her. Ariana, you didn't come all this way just to talk about tea, did you? The guest giggled nervously. Well, I'm so cold I could use a cup of tea, if it's not too much trouble for you. Lucy endured her rival's piercing stare. What difficulty could there be with a pot of tea? I'm sure you didn't come here for a tea ceremony. You guessed correctly. In fact, I had hoped we would discuss things together the morning after the funeral, but you left so quickly, though a widow should stay until the end. I'm sorry, but I can't stand mourning and all these rituals since I was a child. The children were tired too and asked to go home. You could have warned me of your departure. Again, I'm sorry. Ariana waved her hand, warding off pesky insects. Okay, let's not dwell on such trivialities. Lucy, you can probably see why I made such a long journey, as you yourself just noticed, not for sport. Lucy turned off the gas and poured tea for her guests. Of course I understand. Just let's get straight to the point without further ado. Ariana took a small sip and closed her eyes. What a rich flavor, a real tea. By the way, not everyone can afford such a luxury. Even among my acquaintances, there are people who save on tea and drink all sorts of crap from low-quality raw materials. Lucy still didn't understand what the guests were getting at. My grandmother taught me to appreciate good tea. She herself was a fan of this noble beverage. Devotion to tradition. That's commendable, but times change, and one must sometimes adjust one's habits to fit them. This uncertainty began to irritate the young widow, and she asked irritably, Ariana, you traveled almost 200 kilometers just to talk about tea. The guest grumbled unhappily. My God, why are you getting so worked up? You always take everything so seriously. Can't we just talk peacefully about the future? Speak up, I'm listening to you carefully. I see you're not in the mood for a peaceful conversation. Good, then I'll have to give you the facts. Ariana opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. She threw the papers on the desk with irritation. Lucy was surprised and asked, Why the gestures? The woman remarked wryly. But didn't you ask me to speak without unnecessary verbal nonsense? These are the documents confirming that your late husband left you with nothing, or rather nothing. The plate slipped out of the young woman's hands and fell to the floor, breaking into small shards. The guest remarked indignantly, Why are you so careless? As if we don't have enough problems in our house. By the way, are you aware that this apartment is also not yours? Most likely, you know absolutely nothing about your husband. What should I know? And who can evict me from a place I bought with my money? Evict you, the bailiffs, unless you leave the property voluntarily. I can tell you one thing about Tim. He was a man with a hidden agenda. During our happy marriage, I noticed my husband taking money without asking. We had a joint account at the time. I didn't like it, so I decided to keep an eye on him. I thought he was flirting with other women, but it turned out to be much worse. He was gambling. Lucy felt her breathing become labored. She too had had similar suspicions, but her husband had laughed at her fears. With a sigh, she asked, Did he play computer games? Her rival laughed in her face. Lucy, well, what is that to boys? And Tim was a real man, so he played big, that is, in the stock market. He always dreamed of getting rich in one fell swoop and took risks without looking back. Many times I tried to cool him down, and he would calm down for a while. But then it started all over again. Lucy didn't want to believe what she was hearing. It couldn't be true. Tim couldn't have done this to us. You don't believe it? Look at these documents. They're promissory notes. Tim owes a lot of people, and I'm the one who's gonna have to clean up this mess. Ariana pulled one document out of a pile of papers. And here's the mortgage. Enjoy your apartment. Her heart first jumped to her throat, then dropped. Lucy desperately grabbed the back of the chair, but it couldn't be. I can't go outside in the middle of winter with 2 kids. Ariana was triumphant. She had managed to humiliate this peasant girl who thought she was important. For a few seconds, she enjoyed her young rival's confusion, but she wanted to humiliate her even more, and in the same submissive tone she suggested, Lucy, don't be so despondent. Together we can find a way out of this impasse. Lucy raised her eyes full of despair. But is there a way out? I don't just mean a way out of the impasse, but a solution. The guest jumped up from her chair and hugged like a mother. There is. I can offer you and the children a place to stay in our country house. You remember Chicago. You must remember that marvelous place. It was in Chicago that you performed a professional feat when you saved Tim from certain death. I still marvel at your selfless act. I could not have done that. Lucy was tired of listening to her guest's enthusiastic speech, and she interrupted her abruptly. Yes, I remember that village, but there is no school or hospital there, so it's not a suitable option for us. Ariana looked at her in surprise and narrowed her snake-like eyes. Why? What's wrong with that? You'll have to look for a job, and there aren't any in the village. Lucy replied, Ariana, I will not be your maid. You have such a great plan to make me your slave. It won't work. You can drown in your own anger, but it won't work. You have chosen the wrong man. The guest jumped up as if she'd been stung. We'll see about that. You'll be baking bread at my feet. Do you think you can go back to your profession? You won't. I'll make conditions so bad you won't be able to find work, not even as a cleaner or laundress." Already at the door, Ariana shouted, "I'll give you a week to pack, and I don't want you breathing in this apartment." The door slammed and the guest disappeared. The only reminder of her rival's visit was the sickeningly sweet scent of her perfume. Lucy sat down on a chair and burst into tears. The twins crept into the kitchen and began to comfort their mother. "Mommy, don't cry, please. We will help you, and everything will be all right. We will do well in school." The boys' support calmed the woman down a bit. She smiled through her tears. "With such helpers, I won't be lost. And we have a place to get through the hard times, don't we?" Billy's eyes lit up. "You want me to tell you a fortune? We'll be staying at Grandma Nancy and Grandpa Anthony's house." "That's right. That's great. I like the village, and the guys there are nice. It's probably even better in the winter than in the summer." Although the woman wasn't sure of that statement, she didn't want to disappoint her son. "All right, guys, let's hope for the best. And to make sure we don't waste any time, let's start packing. Take only the essentials with you." Steve was disappointed with that stipulation. "So I can bring a construction kit? Does that mean toys aren't on the list of essentials?" The boy sighed sadly. "Can I bring books?" "Only the essentials." Steve muttered something to himself, but he didn't dare argue with his mother. They had 2 days to pack. Lucy wanted very much to spite her rival. After thinking about it, she decided to organize an urgent sale of furniture, dishes, and household appliances. Some of the things were bought by neighbors, and part of it she gave to a large family from a neighboring house, taking into account the proceeds. The widow was very pleased. "For a few months, we will lead a carefree existence, and then we'll see." She tried not to think about the future because the unknown frightened her. They spent the last night in an empty apartment. They had to sleep on the floor, but the boys, tired with excitement, paid no attention to the inconvenience. As soon as their heads touched the pillows, they fell asleep. And the widow. She enjoyed imagining Ariana boiling with indignation when she saw the completely empty apartment. The next morning, Lucy couldn't resist calling Ariana. "We've vacated the apartment. You can use it. I hope we don't owe you anything else." Radish shouted into the receiver. "Wait, don't hang up. I wanted to do something nice." Lucy disconnected the phone, then pulled out and snapped its SIM card. "I don't believe you, and I know for a fact that dangerous acquaintances should be cut off without hesitation." Of all the valuable possessions she could freely dispose of, there was the budget sit-in given to her by her elders for her 30th birthday. Of them she remembered with warmth and gratitude. "Thank you, my dear ones. Your gift is simply invaluable in this situation." It's a wonder Ariana hadn't gotten her hands on that car sooner. On her last night in the apartment where the happiest years had flown by, she thought of Tim. She was hurt that the husband she loved had allowed a complete stranger to run their family's life. The woman whispered all the way, "Where are you? Where are you? What have you done?" There was a moment when the image of her late husband appeared before her eyes. This vision did not frighten the widow, but on the contrary, pleased her. Tim looked guilty and smiled as if he wanted to say something in his own defense. Lucy, in her childhood and youth, she read a lot and was always amazed at how different authors described the moment of the hero's return to this homeland. There was no way she expected to feel excitement on the way to Colorado. The closer she got to her destination, the more anxious she became. It was a very strange feeling, for she had not been born in this place, not in a village among the forests, but in a city. Billy noticed his mother's anxiety. "Mom, well, why are you so nervous? Calm down, or we'll have an accident like this." Steve patted his brother on the head. "Shame on you. Remember what Grandma Nancy said. You can't say anything like that on the road. Mama's worried enough as it is. And you're just putting your own words in." But Billy could no longer be calmed. He decided to remind his older brother and warn him of the consequences of disobedience. "Remember how Grandma said you had a nail sticking out in one place? That's why you need to be watched. If you start being naughty, Mom and I will take you to the woods and leave you there." Steve only laughed and wasn't scared. "I feel at home in the woods. When we went camping as a class, Barbara told us how to behave in extreme situations to survive." Billy learned his lesson quickly. The travelers showed up when the whole class could be heroes. "I want to see you whimper with fear when you're alone." The brothers' faces burned with anger. They were ready to lash out at each other, But Mom, who was watching their argument in the mirror, warned them, "If you don't calm down now, I'll throw you both out of here, and then you'll have to walk to the village." The prospect of walking to the village, with man-high snowdrifts on both sides, dampened the quarrelsome fervor. The brothers made disgruntled faces and fell silent. The last time Lucy had been in the village was more than 2 years ago. She had come to visit the graves of her elders, to check on the condition of the house she had inherited, and to prevent her property from being taken over by fellow villagers and outsiders who were after other people's property. She asked Julianne, the paramedic's wife, to keep an eye on the house. The last time she knocked on the door of her acquaintance's house, Jacob himself came out to her. "Lucy, I'm glad to see you. You've come at just the right time. Are you interested in your house?" "Tim, did you find that strange?" "Who was interested?" "A very respectable man. He wants to have a summer house in an environmentally friendly place. So he liked Anthony's cabin and asked him to call if you were planning to sell the house." Jacob handed her a slip of an old receipt with a cell phone number scribbled on it. Lucy didn't even look at the note. "I don't even have thoughts like that. I'm asking you. If anyone asks you about this again, tell them the house isn't for sale." Jacob scratched his head and hid the note. "As you can imagine, I'd think about it if I were you. After all, the house needs care for the winter. The wood freezes, and then there's dampness and mold. It'll rot without proper care for your inheritance, and if you sold it, at least you'd make some money, right?" Lucy thanked the paramedic for the warning and asked him to take care of the property. Of course, she promised to pay him extra for this favor. The man happily agreed and asked for an upfront payment. Remembering the paramedic, the woman smiled. She regretted that she hadn't warned him of her arrival, but she was sure that everything was fine in the house. But when the car pulled up to Lucy's house, she was amazed to Lucy. A path led from the gate to the porch, and a plump suitcase stood right at the doorstep. The woman jumped out of the car and ran toward the house. "What kind of trickery is this? Who is trying to move into someone else's house?" No one answered that question. The children also came to the scene, and Steve immediately grabbed the suitcase. Lucy yelled at her son not to touch it. There was no telling what was inside, and it was not customary to touch strange objects. Billy burst into laughter. "You're scaring yourself with an ordinary suitcase. Maybe someone forgot it or accidentally left it behind." The boy didn't have time to fully develop his theory, because a strange man wearing a hat with ears down was hurrying down the path toward the house. "This is my suitcase, children. Don't you dare touch anyone else's stuff." The twins were confused, and Lucy walked toward the stranger. "And who are you to make decisions on someone else's territory?" The man froze in place. "I live here, or rather, I will live here." Lucy became aggressive. "So you've decided you're going to live here. Did you decide that on your own?" "Well, I could easily report you to the authorities." The stranger started backing away. "Woman, wait, don't yell. I don't understand why you're so upset. The landlord gave me the keys and I paid 6 months in advance." "What landlord?" "This is my house. You see, good citizen, this is my house. And this whole area is legally mine too." Lucy made an expressive gesture with her hands and looked at the imposter. He realized that he was in an unpleasant situation and stumbled at half a word. "You see, I had an extraordinary situation in life. I urgently needed a place to live outside the city." The woman smirked, but more calmly asked, "And why? Away from the city, there are probably problems with the law." The man stared at her. "Do you think I'm a criminal? You said yourself that you had to go into hiding." "I said nothing of the sort. You, madam, are the one making up stories as you go along. I am not your madam. Not only did you trespass, but you insulted me." "I didn't say anything insulting to you." As usual, Billy spoke up at the most crucial moment. "Uncle, don't yell at my mom." Steve joined his brother too and manfully squared his shoulders. "Do you think that if we don't have a father anymore, you can mistreat our mom?" The man glared at them and took 2 steps back, but stumbled. The stranger was tumbling around in the snow trying to get out of the trap, and the brothers laughed at his helplessness. The boys expected approval from their mother, but she looked at them sternly. "What do you want?" "Help the man get out instead." The stranger spoke up. "Thank you. I can handle the threats myself." The man stood on a narrow path covered with snow. "I was just heading that way." You could have at least said thank you. Lucy muttered, I don't see the need for that. Take your suitcase and leave. I've got nowhere to go, and there's no money for a place to stay. I paid off my landlord yesterday, and today I brought my things here to pay him back. And then you came and attacked me. Lucy stepped back and burst into tears. The stranger approached her with a guilty look and patted her on the shoulder. Don't cry, Lucy, I'll fix it. The woman through her tears said, Dan Ryder, I knew it wouldn't end well. So you spent someone else's money. Calm down, I didn't drink it. I bought useful equipment for my motorcycle, Jacob announced. But the news had the opposite effect on his weeping wife. Steve, where's your equipment? There's something in our yard. I didn't realize it was there. I hid it in the shed for now. Julian went pale. You found someone you can trust, and you're pushing him for a bottle. Oh, dear people, what's going to happen now? The hostess clutched her head and began to cry again. Jacob decided it was time to show his manhood. He shouted at his wife, You will be all right too. Since you know everything, the tractor is coming. He looked pleadingly at Tim, and I think we'll solve the tenant issue too. Lucy, in memory of our friendship, let this man stay. You have a spacious house. He will not disturb you. The young widow didn't like that suggestion. Jacob, I can't. I have a family of my own. Lucy, I'm begging you. I won't be in your debt. Besides, you're unemployed now. The woman nodded in agreement, and the paramedic was pleased. But it'll work out here. They're already planning to write me off. I mean, they want to put me on a well-deserved retirement and the position will be vacated, so I can put in a good word for you. Lucy pondered. Jacob rubbed his hands together happily. Well, I think we've come to an agreement. It would be good for Lucy to celebrate the deal. Julian had fully recovered from the shock. She's decided to take her husband for a spin. I'll take care of the bill. Go to the neighbor's house and make sure the machinery is in the yard in 5 minutes. The guests had no choice but to leave on their own. The boys were silent the whole time while they were inside the house. But as soon as they went outside, they started discussing the exciting incident. That guy is so funny. Yeah, he's great. His aunt used to hit him. Mom, have you known them long? Lucy smiled. Yes, I interned here. Jacob taught me. Steve asked. Mom, are you going to be a doctor again? I don't know yet. It depends on how things go. Stranger always went alone, but when he heard the landlady talking to the children, he asked, maybe it won't work. As far as I know, there's an acute shortage of personnel in our medicine. Yes, there is a problem, but the thing is, I've hardly ever worked in my field. I have a little over a year of experience, so now I can only count on a vacancy as a nurse, and even then in the best case. What does it take to get reinstated? Courses and recertification. It's a lot of work. I didn't even realize medicine would be so strict. It's true. You know, our dean at the university said that medicine should be as disciplined as the military. And your dean is right. I'm sorry, Lucy, but don't you think it's strange that we had a fight and a reconciliation and we haven't been introduced? Victor. The twins watched with interest as the stranger shook their mother's hand. Steve nudged his brother. Look, let's slow down a little. Billy pulled over. Steve, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Whispered the boy as they walked. Well, I think it's all right, man. I didn't like him at first, though. Neither did I, but look at him now. The plump suitcase still stood proudly on the porch. The boys were happy. Yay, nobody took it. Otherwise, we'd be in trouble. Lucy looked sternly at her sons, and Victor pretended not to hear the street slang. It was very cold in the house, and he asked cheerfully, Guys, why don't we light the stove? Billy immediately exclaimed, Yes, because it's such a clown in here. Steve, embarrassed, said, But we don't know how to light the stove. We always used to come here in the summer when it was warm. Grandma Nancy sometimes stoked the stove. She used to make us tea and pancakes. Remembering great-grandma's treats, Steve rolled his eyes and stuck out his tongue. He did it so expressively that Victor burst into laughter. It's okay. Guys, I'll teach you how to light the stove. My grandfather taught me that craft. Billy liked the relaxed conversation, and he became bolder. Uncle Victor, do you know how to make fishing rods? I sure do. I'll tell you a secret. I came here to raise fish. There are many small lakes and rivers in this area. If you organize the business correctly, The costs will quickly pay it off, and it will be good for the reservoirs. Lucy couldn't help but admire the trio sitting by the stove. From the outside, one could think that the father was teaching his sons a simple craft. A thought flashed through the woman's mind. Tim never talked to the children, so plain and simple, he was always in a hurry to get somewhere. The next day, the friendship between the twins and the tenant began to take new forms. The boys found old skis in the attic, and Victor patiently taught them how to handle this equipment. In the evening, problems with the wiring were discovered, and the tenant quickly solved this issue for the boys. The guys watched him closely and followed his every word. Lucy watched this idyllic scene and felt almost happy. Winter passed imperceptibly, replaced by spring, and then came the long-awaited summer. Life in the house of the young widow fell into its usual course. Lucy spent the whole day at the medical center. Her candidacy was gladly approved by the regional health department, and her little practical experience did not prevent it. Victor also cozily settled down on his side of the house. He diligently and without reminders fulfilled his male duties, and the twins followed him like puppies. In winter, the tenant brought a car from the city and sadly remarked, "Too bad you don't have a garage." Lucy seconded him. "I too am concerned about this circumstance. My car is very sensitive to change, and the weather has been unstable lately. Therefore, the children often have to walk to school, which is more than 2 kilometers one way." "Lucy, why didn't you tell me about this problem before? I can easily take the kids to school and check your car if you trust me." She looked into his eyes but saw nothing but a genuine desire to help. "Thank you. You'll be doing me a huge favor." The brothers were overjoyed, but when they found out they'd be driving around in a fancy car, Victor choked up with excitement. "Billy, imagine how surprised everyone's gonna be. This isn't your mom's ear that sneezes every 100 yards. Although it was unpleasant to hear such comments about her car, Lucy kept silent. She didn't want to admit to herself that Victor had quietly but firmly entered their lives. They lived together peacefully enough under the same roof, and the woman did not want to think that one day he would leave their home. Most likely, the apartment also thought about parting. One day at dinner, he said sadly, "You know, Lucy, my life has changed a lot these past few months. I lost my family a few years ago." Lucy and her daughter decided to take a ride to the zoo and got into an accident. Lucy died on the spot, and the doctors tried to save her daughter, but they couldn't. It was the first time a man had ever spoken so openly to her, and Lucy was taken aback. "I didn't know anything about your personal tragedy. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you for your kind words. I know you've been bereaved recently too." The boys told me. "Yes, my husband was killed in a stupid accident. It's a shame when a man wasn't even sick. He was always very active, but he slipped, fell, and that was it. Misfortune always comes unexpectedly. I thought I wouldn't survive, but my friends and work helped me. In my free time, I develop programs and travel. I like fishing. There is a lake nearby. I went to rent it for about 3 years. Fish farming is a very profitable business. I didn't know you could rent a lake. I always thought rivers and lakes were public places. They used to be. But today you can take temporary possession of such a natural object. By the way, it is very useful for ecology, because the lessee is obliged to keep order and follow a whole list of rules. If you are interested, I can organize a tour for you." The adults thought that the children were engrossed in their work, but after learning about the exciting trip, the brothers shouted in one voice, "Uncle Victor, we really want to see your lake. Take us with you." Lucy felt embarrassed by her son's behavior and tried to calm them down. "Boys, you can't be so pushy. The man hasn't finished talking, and you're already pouncing on him." Victor was apparently pleased with the boys' interest. He winked at them enigmatically. "Are you ready? But let's agree that you won't be naughty and won't touch anything." The twins solemnly promised to obey their guide. But as it turned out, trusting their promises was an unforgivable mistake. When they came to a lake hidden deep in the forest, Victor said, "Wait here for a while, I'll lock the car, and then we'll all go to the lake together." But Steve was bursting with impatience. He broke free and jumped onto the steep, treacherous shore. The boy forgot caution and slipped down. Lucy shouted to Steve, "My God, he can't swim." Billy rushed to save his brother. "I can swim. They taught us in gym class." Victor was already quickly undressing and putting on his shoes. He looked at Billy sternly. "And you just stand there like we don't need you to save us." It all happened in a matter of seconds, but it seemed like an eternity to Lucy. She had a bad feeling. She was afraid to move, and she was scared to look toward the lake, until Billy screamed, "Mommy, calm down. Steve's alive. Uncle Victor saved him." A minute later, Victor came to shore. He was carrying Steve in his arms. The boy was conscious, but frightened, either because he'd almost died or because he was about to meet his mother. Lucy took a few steps toward them and couldn't move. She slowly sank to the ground and began to cry. Billy stood nearby, confused. Mommy rarely cried. It was like this. I never hide from them at all. Victor set Steve down beside him and sat down on the ground himself. He didn't know what to do now, so he decided to just wait. Any tears had to end at some point. Steve put his hand on his mother's arm. "Mom, please don't scold me. Just don't cry." Half an hour later, when everyone had rested and calmed down a bit, they headed towards the house. Victor said, "That's all right. I'll tell you about my plans at dinner." The evening went wonderfully. Lucy cooked the meat. She hadn't cooked anything festive for a long time. Victor brought a bottle of expensive wine, put it on the table and said, "Let's celebrate today's event. After all, Steve now has 2 birthdays." And then he began to tell about his plans. The boys listened with their mouths open. Only Billy asked one day, "How do you know all this about fish, about what they like and don't like?" Victor smiled. "You see, Billy, before you start any business, you have to learn everything about it. Otherwise, it's no good." "No. Of course, you can figure it out as you go along, but then you're not immune to mistakes. This can slow down development and eventually ruin the project." Here is a person was looking for a suitable example and suddenly lifted a finger. For example, a person wants to learn how to ride a bicycle, sits down and falls. And another person first asks someone who has been riding for a long time how to keep his balance, how to properly press the pedals, how to brake. And only then does he get on the bike and, oh miracle, he starts riding. Steve suddenly laughed. Billy blushed. Lucy tried to hide a smile. Victor didn't know that Billy had been trying unsuccessfully for a week to learn to ride the old bicycle he found in the barn. Victor looked at the boys in surprise, then smiled and asked, "Did I really hit the mark when Steve was explaining?" The man said, smiling, "I'll try to teach you tomorrow. There's nothing difficult about it." Billy snorted skeptically. "Of course it's nothing hard." "Well, you see, but you'll have to be fully rested for that. So finish your dinner and set it up." There was no need to persuade the boys. By the evening in the village, they were so tired they were ready to fall asleep at the table, plus the shock of the day. "Victor, I won't ask if you need help." Victor helped clear the table. She felt strangely calm, peaceful, as if this was how it should be. Exactly like this. Lucy shook her head, pushing the strange thought away. Then she looked at Victor. "Maybe Grandma's specialty tea." Victor immediately nodded at the tea. "That would be just wonderful. And let's enjoy this wonderful evening outdoors." They sat down on the bench that Grandpa had made and drank tea in silence. Lucy realized that Victor wanted to say something, but she didn't understand what. But this unfinished thought frightened her for some reason. "Lucy." "Yes," she turned to him quickly. Victor was silent for a few minutes, picking up the words. "I should probably go. I've taken shameless advantage of your hospitality, even though you don't have to tolerate my presence. After all, this is all from Jacob's motorcycle blog. By the way, if he wasn't in trouble, how was his moto?" "The blog does exist." Lucy smiled first. "You know it does, yes. I met his wife recently and she's very happy. She says Billy spends so much time on new technology that he even forgets to drink." Victor laughed. "Well, I guess we should forgive him then." Lucy suddenly became serious. "You know, Victor, I've been waiting for this conversation. I don't know why, but I was sure it would happen. You're an honest man, but I have to thank you for living with us. First of all, you do all the men's work around the house. Honestly, I don't know how we'd manage without your help. Secondly, the boys catch every word you say, and I know you're not gonna teach them anything bad. Third, we feel very safe with you around. So what should we do?" Lucy shrugged her shoulders. We have enough space. Why look for something else? You can continue to live with us, unless you have other plans, of course. Victor looked at Lucy carefully, as if expecting her to say something else, but Lucy looked at her feet. Okay, Lucy, thank you. I'll think about it. The next day, Lucy sat in her medical office. Summer is a hot time in the village, and there were far fewer patients. Either everyone had forgotten about their ailments, or they just didn't have the time. In any case, only 2 or 3 people had come to see her in the last few days. She perked up when she heard someone enter. You're settling in quite nicely, I see. Lucy looked in surprise at Robert, Arian's son. What are you doing here? Robert sat down on a chair next to the table. What's wrong with you? Could it be that I'm sick, and you greet me so unfriendly? Lucy suddenly realized that she felt no emotion, no hatred, no fear, no feeling of a beaten dog that she felt in the presence of Arian herself or in the presence of her son. She smiled. People like you don't get sick. Robert looked at her in amazement. Wow, have you changed? What can I do for you? Robert looked at Lucy thoughtfully. It looked like it wasn't going to be as easy as his mother had promised. The thing is, some circumstances have come to light. Arian's ex-husband and his adoptive father were not what they all thought they were. At first, there were no questions at all. Everything went to the mother as it should. Then it suddenly became clear that it wasn't that simple. Part of the business, which was registered to Tim, the apartment, which was also registered to him, were written down on the children. And he was doing it secretly from Ariane, although she was sure that she knew everything Tim was doing. Since it was done by a completely different notary, they didn't know about it right away, though Ariane had a hunch. Tim was paying too much attention to this Lucy, even though he had originally married her only so that she would bear him a child. And he realized that the less intimacy between them, the safer, the easier it was for her to control Tim. It was precisely because the woman had some suspicions that she didn't want to let Lucy out of her sight. One thing she wasn't wrong about, Lucy didn't fight for anything, though she could have. After all, they had the money to buy an apartment, they had children together. Now that new circumstances had come to light, something had to be done immediately, because Robert was living in the apartment, so Ariana sent her son. You have to get her to sign the papers. Mom, but I don't know, scare her. Think of something. I can't do everything forever. No one can disobey her, not even Robert. But to be honest, he was expecting a slightly different encounter. Anyway, he and his mother thought there wouldn't be a problem. Yes, he was in the neighborhood and he'll probably stop by. I came to rest at the cottage. Lucy stood up. If I'm not mistaken, I can't leave you. Robert was tired too. He walked over to Lucy and looked mockingly into her eyes. And Lucy suddenly realized that she was really scared. He had shown up here for a reason. Robert reached for her chin and Lucy flinched. He tried to catch her, but she grabbed the chair in her hand. Go away. Robert walked away satisfied. After all, she's afraid of him, and that's a good thing. In the evening, Victor does something with the boys in the yard. Lucy, having finished her chores, also went out and sat on a bench. And so she froze, staring at one point. She did not see that Victor was looking at her intently. When the boys went to bed, he came into the kitchen. Lucy, what's wrong? She shuddered, then sat down at the table and began to tell him. Victor listened attentively to the unhappy woman's confession. Sometimes he nodded his head and did not understand how she tolerated it all. Why do you think he came? Lucy shrugged her shoulders. I don't know. I can't even guess. Victor thought for a moment. From his experience, he realized that not much time had passed since her husband's death, so this visit could not be just a courtesy visit. Most likely some new circumstances had come to light. He was planning to go to town in a couple of days to finalize the deed to the reservoir and decided to drop in on his familiar notary for a cup of tea to see if he knew anything. A week went by. Victor had gone to town for a few days, and Lucy missed him terribly. She was afraid to admit it to herself. She realized that she had become too attached to her lodger. Lucy was approaching the house when she saw a strange car at the gate. Her heart jumped, and she quickened her step, for she thought it was Robert. He was sitting at the head of the table, and the boys were huddled on the couch. What are you doing here? Who invited you? Robert raised his hands playfully. Are you scolding me? Why are you scolding me? I came to visit the boys' relatives, and it turns out they don't consider me their brother. They don't consider you their brother, and you know it. Leave immediately." Robert's eyes narrowed unfriendly. "We need to talk, Lucy. We have nothing to talk about." "You're mistaken. We have a lot to talk about. Shall we talk here, or shall we go out in the yard?" Lucy saw that the boys were very frightened and pointed to the door. "Let's go outside." Robert went outside, waited for her, and started talking right away. "So, my dad, your husband messed up something before he died, and it needs to be fixed, and then I'll leave you alone." Lucy felt a pounding in her temples. "What's this got to do with me? I didn't interfere in my husband's affairs. And anyway, what can you say about a man who abandoned his own children?" "Well, you were supposed to make sure your husband stayed out of other people's business." Lucy smiled. "Let's get down to business. You need to sign some papers." "I'm not signing anything. I have nothing to do with my husband's business or yours." "Oh, Mommy." Lucy turned to leave the house, but Robert grabbed her arm and squeezed it painfully. "Will you sign this?" "Let go. It hurts." "It'll hurt more, I promise you." He barely had time to speak before he was gone. Lucy only then heard him scream. Victor was standing next to her, rubbing her arm. "If I see you here again, I'll break your arms and legs." He and his mother were good psychologists. They could crush anyone weaker than them. But against Robert's physical strength, they were always at a disadvantage. "Lucy, we need to go to town right away. Get all the papers and let's go." "There's no time to explain. I'll explain everything on the way." Lucy wanted to ask something, but then quickly went into the house. 20 minutes later, they were on their way. Victor explained that by a happy coincidence, his friend was the very notary at whom Town had secretly drawn up the documents with his first wife. And he'd agreed to stay late at work so that Victor could bring Lucy. She even cried a little, not such a bad man. Her husband was there for her. Apparently, somewhere in the depths of his soul, he still had something human. An hour later, they were in the city, and 2 hours later, they were there. Lucy was given the documents for her own apartment and some other papers, which she did not understand at all. It would all be sorted out later. "Now let's go to the store, get some good wine, and go home. We'll celebrate two things at once." The boys jumped in the back seat. "Yay, a party. What about the kebabs?" Victor waved his hand. "And the kebabs too." Lucy, still not fully recovered, looked at Victor carefully. He seemed too excited. It was unusual to see calm Victor in such a state. When the meat was already roasted, all the glasses were filled, and the boys were playing on the grass outside the house waiting for dinner. Lucy asked quietly, "Is something wrong?" Victor smiled. "You've studied me well. It's nothing special. It's just that I'm always uncomfortable. When a dream is shattered, I've been denied a lease, or rather, they set a price I have to pay up front, and it's too high. I have money, but not that much, so the idea of fish farming is out." "But how come?" "They promised. Everything was almost ready," he shrugged. "I gather someone else liked the idea, but I have to deny myself to make it look right. That's why this change, but it's not fair. Life isn't always fair. So shall we say goodbye? I'm going into town in the morning." Lucy looked at him and realized she felt like crying. She didn't want him to go. The boys were silent too. They sat across from each other and looked at their mother and Victor. "Well, are you sad?" Lucy did not sleep. She tossed and turned for a long time, then got up and went out on the porch. When she heard footsteps behind her, she was not frightened at all. A man's hands rested on her shoulders, and Lucy turned around to find herself in Victor's strong arms. She'd been waiting for this, and he'd been dreaming of it. He knew it would be even harder for him to leave. He knew he shouldn't do this, but there was nothing he could do. Ever since he closed his eyes, he couldn't sleep. So when he heard Lucy go outside, he immediately got out of bed. In the morning, the boys looked at a sad mom and an overly cheerful Victor. Did Mom do anything to make him stay? Victor didn't understand what to do at all. Even yesterday, if something like this had happened, he would have stayed without hesitation. But now that Lucy was a wealthy woman, she had an apartment, she was doing fine on her own. Why would she want a loser like him? He gathered up all his things and carried them to the car. Lucy sat silently in a chair. The boys settled down on the couch. They did not understand why things could not remain as before. The events of the last few days were completely incomprehensible to them. They realized that they could go home now, but they didn't want to. It was much better here. They really liked living together with Victor. He entered and stopped on the threshold. "Well, let's say goodbye." Billy and Steve ran up to him and hugged him. "Uncle Victor, can't you stay?" "Well, maybe we can work something out." "If I could think of something, I would, because my savings are about to run out." "And then what?" "I can't be your freeloader." "Victor, you're a man." He smiled. "Maybe God will provide something else." Lucy got up and came to him, looked into his eyes. "Victor, if there was an investor who wanted to invest in your business, would it make a difference?" He smiled. "It would change everything. I'm sure he wouldn't regret it." Lucy looked at the guys, then said decisively, "The guys and I want to be your investors." Victor's eyes widened. "How could that be possible?" The boys smiled. Now they understood why their mom had asked them today if they wanted to stay here for a while or go back to the city, and they declared that they wanted to live here, but not alone, but with Victor. "Anyway, we decided that we're not ready to go back to the city yet, and we want to live here. We could sell the apartment, invest the money in a business, and then, if the business is profitable, we will definitely buy something." Victor sat up in confusion, but Lucy smiled and for the first time in front of the children addressed him without her middle name. "Victor, stay. We will miss you very much." He stood up, looked at Lucy for a long time, then said, "Then I have a favor to ask. Lucy, marry me. I honestly don't know if I would have had the strength to leave today or not. I didn't have to sell the apartment." Ariana broke free and demanded that she get back the part of the business that Tim had fraudulently taken from her. Lucy didn't hesitate to name a price, and then she stopped talking half-heartedly. She looked at Lucy carefully and, realizing that she was wrong, agreed. A year later, a little princess appeared in the family, and her happy father, and already a successful businessman, bought all the balloons in the neighborhood. But that's another story.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.